Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillor Wildy, who I'm substituting for, Councillor Anang, who Councillor Gilbourne is substituting for, and apologies from Councillor Lamas, and Councillor Barrett is currently running late, but will be with us shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perfect. Councillor Brown?
I've got apologies from Councillor Cook and I'm substituting for her.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. And Terry?
Councillor Croser is also running late. He's had car issues, but he'll be with us a bit later.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just also say, just before we start, can I just say that it's Saviani's last meeting here for Health Watch Medway this evening, and she's leaving Health Watch to join Medway's public health team, so congratulations. And I don't know if it's a good thing, because you see what we do here if ever you come in front of us. Good luck. Good luck with that one. So, but congratulations from all the committee. Well done. Thank you. Members, can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 17th of June 2025 as correct, please? Is that agreed? Agreed. I have no urgent matters. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests or any declarations of whipping? Kerry?
Yeah, so on Councillor Hammond-Dish's behalf, he has a DPI in the first item on the agenda as he holds employment with KMPT. Therefore, he won't be present for the discussion or the decision on that item and will join the meeting later once that item has concluded.
Okay, and no other DPIs? Fantastic. Can I just remind all those speaking this evening that the agenda is extremely heavy, hence we're starting 30 minutes early this evening. And can I remind you just to keep the introductions to a bare minimum, and we have all read your papers, so we know what's in the papers. So if you want to give a minute just quickly to highlight, that's fine, but I will switch off your mic if you go longer than that. Thank you very much. Can I go to item 5, which is the contract award for integrated all-age mental health services in Medway? Who would like to just give a quick highlight on that? Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald, and good evening, everyone. I'm Natalie Davies, Chief of Staff for the Integrated Care Board. Absolutely taking the paper as read. Just to summarise, from April next year, there will be one provider of mental health services in the county, which will be Kent and Medway Partnership Trust. This provides us with an opportunity to integrate the mental health provision between adults and children. We've noted there are times when that transition does struggle for our families. So it's quite an exciting opportunity to be able to integrate that service. What's going to be absolutely critical for that is how we make sure we involve the public, the service users, and the staff, of course, in the development of the service. The service will transfer absolutely as is, including the transfer of staff in the first instance. And then our absolute commitment to the committee is to take you with us on the journey every step of the way as we work with KMPT to develop that service so that we can better serve the people of Medway and Kent. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Can I also welcome our Chair and Vice Chair from our Children's Overview and Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Hellcroft-Scott and Councillor Madrakers. You're very welcome. And also Councillor Turpin as well here tonight. Thank you very much for attending. We are here because obviously this impacts your, the people you represent on your scrutiny too. And I am going to give you the floor first, if that's okay with members, because, you know, like I say, they are the Children's Scrutiny Committee, so I want to hand over to them. Councillor Hellcroft-Scott, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the papers which I've read. Unfortunately, I need to speak to say that I'm kind of deeply concerned, really. We're, you know, elected officials who are members of the Overview and Scrutiny, us here for children, and then we obviously have the health and ONS as well. And we have procedures of procurement, procedures of commissioning, and they have just been rode roughshod, really, and I'm troubled and concerned by this. We have these democratic safeguards, and they exist so that we have transparency, accountability, proper involvement of elected members, and these decisions affect our whole community. My background is in education, and I've worked with children for 38 years. But if you want to train, even though I've got a biochemistry degree as a secondary teacher, the minimum requirement is 2 years practice with 11 to 18-year-olds. Yet you're telling us we can have this continuum of service, and I do listen to you. There is issues with transition. You know, how do you be 18 one day and 18 in one day and you're suddenly an adult? You know, there are those issues, but there are different levels of expertise, and to disregard our scrutiny, our procurement processes, I think that weakens our local trust, and it risks, I think, you know, with saying that your practitioners can work from 0 to 190 naught, you know, it leaves people and communities vulnerable. And to my mind, we have, you know, pre-COVID and possibly will continue to have a greater and intense need at our end of the spectrum. And you know, there are different levels of expertise, surely. So I am really concerned about this, and I would like this not to be going through this evening, and that's what I want to say.
Natalie, would you like to comment?
Thank you. Yeah, just to be really clear, we're absolutely not saying, and it'd be great to hear from our colleagues at KMPT, who I should have introduced as well as Jane. We're absolutely not saying that there will be practitioners who therefore work from 0 to 100. You know, there are very specialist services for children, for adults across that. And those professionals train for years and years to specialise in their areas. What this provides us with is an opportunity for those services to work closely together. It's not putting all the services together, let me be really clear, and I'm sorry if I've misled into the introduction, but making sure there's a real seamless transfer for people between services, and that is a really coherent experience for the whole family involved there. It's absolutely not saying that children's services are the same as adult services. I wouldn't want for a moment that to be the case. But it is around making sure that as far as the patient and the family are concerned, that they get exactly the right service, specialist tailored service that they need at that moment. And then, if required, that seamless transfer to other services that they will need without having to tell their whole story again to a new professional. And that is really to improve the experience. But would you mind introducing yourselves? And Andy would be great to...
Sorry, Natalie, just before you move on, we do know Adrian, we do know Andy, they've been here quite a few times. But just to be clear, Councillor Scott also asked you, and it is in your lap really, is the commissioning part. There seems to have been a lift and shift commissioning process happened here without any clarity or transparency. That's what Councillor Scott is asking you. Why was it done? Why is there just this lift and shift given you know, and KMPT, now I'm not criticising whoever it was given to, but it's just been lifted and shifted over without transparent process. I think that's what Councillor Scott is asking you. So before you hand over to KMPT, if you can answer that.
Yeah, absolutely, I will. And to be clear, this wasn't a procurement, this was a contractual arrangement, and that is, of course, the responsibility of the ICB to make sure that we have the right contracts in place in order to discharge our responsibilities in terms of the provision of service. But I'm going to ask Jane to come in.
Thank you. So to answer your question, I think we found ourselves in a unique position across Kent and Medway in that we had a contract that was currently coming to an end and a provider that had also indicated to us that they were wishing to leave the Kent and Medway footprint and to concentrate on their services in other areas and in strengthening those. So as an ICB, we went through a procurement process. We identified KMPT as the only provider that were capable to meet the full requirements of the service in terms of experience, infrastructure, workforce and clinical governance. I absolutely take on board your point about we could have been more open and transparent and communicated that more, and I think it's been difficult in the timescale that we've had to work to in terms of ensuring that we came up with a contract that was going to be safe, because that's been our absolute priority all the way through, is ensuring that we've got a safe service for children in the future and that we don't put that at risk. As Natalie has said, as part of that procurement process, we chose to apply direct award A because it met that criteria under the provider selection regime, and we've taken a lot of legal advice around that. Also just want to reiterate in that what we're saying absolutely is that services are not materially going to be any different from the existing provision at the point of contract award. KMPT are a single capable provider in context of local market, and we made a decision under procurement rules that this route offered us the lowest risk and the best assurance of continuity and safety.
Thank you, Jane. Adrian, did you want to answer briefly? Because you're going to get a load more questions, but obviously from Councillor O'Cross-Scott's, or Andy, over to you. It's about the experience level with children.
Yes, certainly. Andy Cruikshank, Chief Nurse, KMPT. So in terms of the expertise within KMPT, so for example, myself, I was a senior CAMS clinician for a very long time, and it was my clinical specialty and ran CAMS services in East London. Our Deputy Chief Executive ran CAMS services across the South London footprint, so we have familiarity. My deputy was a very senior CAMS nurse as well. So we have a degree of expertise in this field within the organisation, but it's the key point here is that those services are coming across as they are with their clinicians. We're not looking at diluting anything about the workforce and introducing people without CAMS experience or experience with children into services at all. It's really just a transition from one structure to another as far as they're concerned. So it shouldn't disrupt what they do clinically at all, certainly at the point of transfer. And then we'll work with them and yourselves to think about what the direction of travel should be for those services.
Councillor O'Cross-Scott, do you want to come back or do you want to hold?
Yeah, I kind of, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I kind of find it really difficult to agree. It's all about relationships. I feel you haven't really communicated with us. This has been a done deal. But also, we're elected to serve the wider community of Medway. There are 63,000 children. There's over 7,000 on the waiting list. And actually, how's that message been communicated with them? And why haven't you followed proper procedures? That's why we have overview and scrutiny. You wouldn't like me to rock up at your meetings and say, actually, it's more productive to have a standing meeting. So there's a bit of AstroTurf. Let's stand on there and do it this way. And that's what I feel you're doing to us. This is it. This will work. This is us fixing it. But actually, we need open lines of communication. We need to ensure that we're getting best value. We need to ensure the needs of our children are paramount and met. And actually, there needs to be a relationship and communication, not just with us, but the service level agreement, the service users, parents and carers, grandparents, and the whole community. That's what I think.
Thank you, Councillor O'Cross-Scott. Councillor Mandarakis.
So much of mine has been covered. I think the main concerns are around that transparency of the process and around the expertise, but I think that is covered if there was expertise in the leadership of having delivered children's services before. I'm slightly more allayed on that. I do think the process, though, of it just handing over is an issue, and actually I think we as a committee have not had a chance to have looked at that. But my other concern was around waiting lists, and I couldn't really see in the papers anything that really spoke about how you can do a transition like that and ensure that when there's already massive backlogs in CAMS, that kind of transition doesn't create longer waiting lists and longer backlogs.
So if I'll start with so we have followed a proper process, but I want to recognise clearly the disappointment that you feel you haven't been involved in that. The contract is let by the Integrated Care Board, and so that's our responsibility, and we take our responsibility to the public very, very seriously. And certainly that engagement going forwards in terms of the potential for the service will absolutely be brought to the relevant committees of the council, discussed clearly and engaged fully with. Do you want to talk about the waiting list issues?
Sorry, Natalie. It's just for clarity here for the members, and Jane, you're more than welcome here tonight. We hope to see you more. But Jane obviously said it may not have been as open and transparent as what you would have liked. And now you're saying you follow the proper process. I think what members are telling you, it wasn't transparent. It's not the first time we've said this to the ICB about a lack of transparency in contracting and procurement. And here we are again this evening. I think we need to recognise and answer that tonight, that it wasn't as transparent, as open as it should have been. Scrutiny didn't know about it. And I think that's what the members want answered first before we move to the waiting list.
I think there's a difference, isn't there, between a proper process in terms of legal. I wouldn't want to give the impression that it wasn't a proper process that followed the procurement law in the NHS very closely and very clearly. But fully recognise the disappointment of the committee in terms of their involvement in that, and really want to take you on the journey forwards in terms of the development of the service, that potential for the future, and how we will move that service together and that integrated service across mental health in Kent and Medway.
Just moving on to the waiting list for Councillor Mandarakas then, please.
If I come in on that first, and then I'll pass over to my colleagues. So acknowledge your point and your concerns about the Medway children on the waiting list. Just want to say that you'll be really familiar with the partnership commissioning team in Medway. We work incredibly closely with that team. We know at the moment that in terms of the Medway caseload, actually for the general mental health services, there are only very few children. There's only 13 children that are actually waiting over 18 weeks for their second contact, and that over 90% of children for those general mental health services are seen within 18 weeks for their second contact. And there's been a huge amount of work done on reducing those waits and getting those down. In terms of the neurodevelopmental pathway, so those children waiting for ADHD or autism assessments, we know that the waits are longer. That's a national problem as well as being the same across Kent, but we're working really, really hard on reducing those waits. We are absolutely following due diligence as part of the transfer, so working incredibly closely with NELFT as the current provider and with KMPT to ensure that those children that are currently waiting are kept safe while they're waiting, and that all of the information and everything is fully communicated across to the new provider. So we are fully confident that there is nothing that would impact on those waiting times. And in fact, this does give us a unique opportunity to really look at some of the specific demographics around Medway and really work on how we can change and integrate services as we go forward. But I'll pass over to colleagues to see if they want to say anything else about that as well.
Thank you. So good evening. I'm Adrian Richardson. I'm the Director of Transformation and Partnerships at KMPT. We obviously within KMPT are still working with NELFT and the ICB on our due diligence, but what we have ensured is that the transition program of transferring of services from NELFT to KMPT has 6 significant work streams that we are addressing, 2 of which include the data and digital and also the governance work stream, both which have key components looking at the waiting list as well, to make sure that we are monitoring that to make sure that during that transition period that there are no negative aspects to the transfer over, and then if we were to notice anything, to put those key responses in place.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor? Can I just remind those speaking to pull their microphones nearer to them, please, because they are a bit temperamental. Councillor Turpin, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I probably sort of expressed a lot of concerns that have already been expressed, certainly by Councillor Howcroft-Scott with regards to sort of transparency. And I think, you know, I've not sat on this committee for a number of years, but I think I'm probably right in saying this isn't the first time that this kind of scenario has come before us. So I think that's, you know, hence the frustration that you're hearing is because, it's happened several times in the past, I believe. But sort of moving on to sort of concerns that I have, it's, I mean, am I right in thinking that this all-age sort of approach is the only sort of service in the NHS that will work in that way? I mean, I think in other we have paediatric services, and if a child is having cancer treatment or any other services, they would go to a specialist provision for young people. So I think my concern is with this is how is it going to actually look like, on the ground for the service user, because I appreciate you sort of answered the question with regards to it's not going to be a 0 to 100 service, and there are going to still be specialist clinicians dealing with each age group. And, on a positive, I can see, with regards to this sort of transition for 16 to 25-year-olds, that being a benefit. However, I'm concerned that, how will it look like on the ground for the patient? And is there going to be this sort of scenario with regards to sort of waiting lists, an example? If you've got a higher number, say in adults, are you going to say, well, those that look after children, or could you just cover this for a few days, and vice versa? That's my concern with this all-age looking service. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. In terms of, is this unusual in the health service? No, it's not unusual for mental health providers to provide care across the age range. That's quite common. I've worked with it for decades prior to coming to Kent. It was quite unusual. It was the other way around. It's quite unusual that CAMS weren't included in the offer within the organisation. In terms of the retaining the specialism and the specialist nature of it, it will be its own separate clinical directorate. So it won't be subsumed into the larger adult services. It will have its own distinct identity within the organisation. And from a safety perspective, as the chief nurse, I would not be allowing clinicians who do not have the appropriate qualifications and experience to look after or to attempt to look after children within our services. And that's something I take very, very seriously.
Can I come back in on that as well, Dan? Thank you. One of the things I just want to say is that it does give us a real opportunity here. We know and we are constantly seeing increased complexity in family systems, and that they're telling us repeatedly that current services are disjointed, they're duplicative, and they're confusing for families. And we know that mental health challenges are often interrelational, and intergenerational, sorry. And so we know that, and what we really hope and aspire to is that having a provider that provides all age services, and as Andy has clearly said, it will be separate. There's a separate thing. So we're not saying that they will go into an all-age service. There will be very specific children's offer. However, that will help us improve information sharing and joint planning. We're really aiming that will help us reduce escalation into crisis services. It'll enable those smoother transitions. And we're really looking to try and imagine a system where a struggling child and their family can walk through one door and that they're getting the joined-up care and support that they need without having to keep explaining their story multiple times. That's a future that we're seeing as part of this move that we really hope that you will be supporting us with in-house.
Councillor Scott, do you want to come in once more if I open to panel, if I open to members?
Yeah, just a couple of points really. Obviously at the moment we're a small unitary authority and Kent is much bigger. So, you know, and obviously you haven't had the relationship or the dialogue with us or even recognised our scrutiny process. So how can we really have that trust that we are going to have influence in terms of what we want for our children and our families? And also, if you're talking about Kent and Medway wide, you know, I had a medical appointment in Tunbridge yesterday. It took me an hour and a half. So what I'm talking about is locations. Some of our most vulnerable families have limited incomes, and if they're going to be having to travel, you know, everywhere, that's another concern for me, really. And I want to know, have you, you know, we've got Ailish and David, who are, you know, public health award winners. How much dialogue have you had with them if you've ignored ONS? Have you opened the relationship with those guys as well, please?
If I can come to the point about children having to travel, absolutely, there's nothing that's going to change. So they're going to have be seeing the same clinicians in the same place. They'll have the same access points, and it will be the same premises. And we're not anticipating that anything that will change. We're absolutely focused on ensuring that those vulnerable children are seen as close to home as possible. That's part of why we're working so hard to ensure this is a safe transition. We do have very good relationships with Ailish and our public health colleagues, but there is always more we can do to improve those. And again, acknowledging the frustration of the committee here and really want to work with you in terms of how we can improve that trust and relationship as we move forward. We've got a lot of work to do between us all.
Thank you, Jane. I think just emphasising the question again, I've got Ailish and David here, is about the knowledge and knowing about this contract, and obviously ONS didn't, so I don't know if they want to comment, or if they don't, it's fine, but I'm handing that comment if you want to, Ailish.
I think Jane's absolutely right. We do work very closely around children's commissioning and children's decisions. The Therapeutic Alliance, for example, which our CYP ONS colleagues will be very well cited on, is an example of where it has worked well. I think it's fair to say that it's not always consistent, as Jane has acknowledged, and sometimes there are decisions that we find out after they've already been made. But you know, there's governance and processes within the ICB that it gets taken through that route. So I think there's work to be done there that we can improve that going forward as well. But there are absolutely examples where it has worked very well too.
Thanks, Ailish. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I doubt you're going to get any contribution without some sort of commentary on this process. I don't think it's going to be a single contribution not predicated on this. So what I really want to understand is how it looks from your angle, because I'm just trying to get my head around this. There's a couple of things that have been said, which I think have been unintentionally perhaps quite revealing. I think a couple of times you made the point of saying, what is the ICB's responsibility? And I can tell you, I think we're all aware very clearly of what the ICB's responsibilities. And may I point out that part of that is also to be transparent to the public, to be scrupulously transparent to the public, to bring stakeholders like us along with you on the journey. I think that is part of your responsibility, as well as creating and procuring contracts. So please don't lose sight of that. We're not asking you to do something that is not within your ken. This is exactly what you're supposed to do. You're a publicly funded organization. We have been voted in by the public. So when you talk about public engagement and listening to service users, it's all rendered meaningless if you can't work with us, because we are the voice of the public. You know, the second thing that was said was that you were so keen to protect the safety and health and well-being of your service users that you didn't have a chance to brief us. I mean, honestly, a one-page brief, an informal meeting request to just let us know what's happening. Just please, how is that such a hard, you know, you're talking about very complex procurement processes, very complex contractual arrangements. The chair, I know personally, has several times pleaded with everyone that just bring us along on the journey, give us informal updates, you know, have a workshop, we will give our feedback. We've made it very clear in every way possible that we don't want you to show up to a 4-hour seminar with lots of PowerPoints. We don't want you to do that. We don't want you to be distracted from your main job of delivering health and well-being services for our residents. So I don't think it's such a huge ask to create a briefing to say, hey, this is what you're planning to do, this is what we're finding. Just share your findings with us. I literally do not understand the downside. I mean, not just are we elected officials, we're also parents, we are service users, we speak to residents all the time. Between us, we have, you know, so much experience about what your patients and service users are experiencing. Why would you want to exclude us from that? It just, when you speak about public engagement, and when you speak about not having the time to brief, it's actually very revealing of how you think of us. We are not an important stakeholder to you. That's pretty evident. You're doing this thing when you map out your stakeholders and your process. You got Post-its everywhere. At some point, you're taking our Post-it and putting it right down at the bottom, like, we'll get this all done, we'll quickly drop a note to them. That's where we sit. That is what we are getting. I just don't understand how you cannot consider a health scrutiny body a key stakeholder. So I'm going to ask you candidly, do you do that? Do you literally just look at a list of stakeholders and say, those guys are just going to ask annoying questions, we haven't got the time for that, let's just kind of push them down the list? How do you see us as stakeholders? Where do we rate for you? Because this is Groundhog Day. I can see us coming here again and again and again. So it'll be good to see how you see us.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. It's not the first time you've been asked that, Natalie, is it?
Yeah. So we don't see you that way. I think, you know, we really recognise how important this committee is, and I think the job going forward is to build the future with that consultation on an engagement and review together on the services that might be changing or the proposals, and to have that really clear forward plan that we discuss informally as well as formally through these committee meetings. I think that is really important. And no, there is no stakeholder assessment that puts this committee down. This is a really important committee to us, and we do want to build that relationship up, recognising it's not where it needs to be.
Do I have any other members? Councillor Jackson, then Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just sort of going on what Councillor Campbell said. I feel like it is Groundhog Day. I feel like, you know, like words are being said today that they were said before, and it's about, you keep throwing out this word trust, but we've had this before. And how can we trust you? Because there is no, like, as far as I'm concerned, sitting around here listening to you now, I have no trust in anything you said, because we had this before, we had the frustrations, and I think you sort of knew that, which is why you stressed that legally you hadn't done anything wrong. You already had it, already planned to sit there and say it to us. And this, it also worries me that you went ahead with this contract saying that you had to do it for the safety of the public and people using the services. And naively, maybe from me, I'm thinking, but we don't know if there was anybody out there because you haven't gone to tender. So there might have been somebody else that you could have brought back and we could have discussed it. But that was taken away. No one else has had the chance to tender for this. You have just taken it upon yourself to say, and it might be the right, I'm not doubting that, but this is where the trust gets in. How do I know that they are the right people and you had to bring them in because for the safety of the public? If we don't know that, we're not having them discussions. And for you to go and go through a procedure that we don't even know you're doing. I just find it really, you keep throwing out this word frustrated. We're not frustrated. It's more than frustrated. It's like you sit there and say to us, oh yeah, well, we want to build these relationships. I know that if we go back and look at recordings, you said exactly the same things. And here we are again in exactly the same position. And so I think frustrated is probably an understatement.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Brown.
Sorry, I seem to be joining the long train of Groundhog Day people. But if I could remind you of the facts. We had the Chief Executive of the ICB in here and asked some very simple questions about that required yes and no answers. We didn't get those. We got a lot of platitudes. We had some of the same faces that are in this room tonight answer questions in the same vein. This report is full of the woes of the ICB trying to reduce their budget. Now, if you can't give us the respect we deserve with the current budget, what guarantees are you prepared to make tonight, professionally and personally, that we will have some level of respect in the future? That's one question. The second question, Councillor Jackson's perfectly correct. It does appear that while you may have done legal due diligence and you may have legally executed your duties, we're not in a position that we can actually challenge that anyway. But if we accept that, which I think we will, how are we to be confident that there won't be shortcuts in every single thing around managing this contract? Because it does look like it was just shoved together for expedience and to reduce the operating budget of the ICB. It was to meet a timescale that was either imposed by yourselves or the people wanting to pull out of it previously. But as somebody who actually lets contracts for a living, I can accept that you might have done things legally, but this is not proper. So if you could answer my first question first, please.
Sorry, could I just get clarity on what the first question was regarding?
It was about the respect
budget.
and how you're going to demonstrate some respect for this committee and the people of Medway, when all we've had, as long as I've subbed on this committee, from the ICB is platitudes, indirect answers to questions, which were simply yes or no, because I remember challenging the chief exec to a very simple yes or no question, which he refused to answer, and then send somebody else the next time we wanted the answers. So how are you going to demonstrate that in the future we are not going to come back to this, I want to use a strong word, but to this situation where we have been absolutely disrespected by the fact that the ICB gives us platitudes but won't actually engage? How are you going to do this and reduce your budget? Like you've put in about 6 paragraphs here of all about the problems with reducing your budget with the ICB. How are you going to make this committee have some trust that they'll have the respect that they should have been given?
Okay, so I can't make the committee trust us. I'm not asking you to extend that without evidence, because
No. I'm not asking you what we should be doing. I'm asking you what you will do to restore the trust. What?
So, and I
Yeah,
was
well,
coming to that.
No, you started off with what we should do and how you can't restore our trust. Tell us what you're going to do to make an effort to do it.
Yeah, I was also responding to Councillor Jackson's about how are you going to get us to trust you. And I think the issue is that trust is not given, it's earned. And so we need to be able to demonstrate to you that we are trustworthy. That's how we will gain your trust, and we will do that.
Councillor Brown, just let Natalie finish the...
Sorry, but that's the vague platitudes again.
Yeah, and I will get there. I realise that this is very emotive. That needs to be earned by us, by working with you and taking you through every step of this service, if there are developments or if there are any changes to this, to take you through all of those together, to work with you on really early identification, not when we think we've got a solution, but maybe when we think we've got a problem to begin with. And we're going to need to work at that and put some real effort in as the ICB.
The second was, did you have a second question, Councillor? Or is that being
I've heard it all before.
Okay. Councillor Perfect.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, let me just move this. And look, thank you very much for coming here. I appreciate it's difficult, Natalie. You know, I do appreciate you are the Chief of Staff and your Chief Executive's not here. You should be fronting this up, in my opinion. But that's again a corporate governance question, because I think part of the frustration you're noticing, and look, I'm happy to make clear, we've got both sides of the political divide here. You know, I share everything that's been said. Serious concerns about the ICB, and it's not just in relation to this. We've got obviously a later paper coming up. We've got all sorts of cultural issues, which not only are we seeing through this committee, but I'm seeing elsewhere as well in the behaviour towards, members of the executive and members, talking to colleagues across Kent and Medway, not impressed. Not only does there seem to sort of constantly be this sort of commitment to change and commitment, we're going to change, we're going to do this, we're going to be more consultative, lots of great words. And as you've noticed again tonight, there's not that feeling. It's very disappointing. And I think, your Chief Executive, if you could take this back to maybe tomorrow to him and be very clear, I'd tell him to watch the tape, because I think everything that's been said so far is completely accurate. And I think it can't just be all the time coming back again saying we're going to do it differently again and we're going to move forward. There needs to actually be that change that people need to see if you want that positive relationship with elected politicians across the county. I mean, just in terms of specifically coming back to this, I mean, you opened the report, Natalie, by saying that, you want to take us with you on a journey, as you've done, you haven't done that so far. The report, for me, I'm still not getting answers as to why there's no procurement process. I mean, with all due respect, Jane, you've just said to us that you didn't need to run it and you're happy to award it as a direct reward with no procurement. Natalie, you said that there was no procurement. Jane then said there was procurement. We've got this back and forth going. I don't really understand any of it, or why you took the decision that you took. It's still not entirely clear. It's no disrespect to KMPT. It's nothing to do with them to a certain extent. You're the ICB. You received the funding from the Department of Health and Social Care, NHS England, etc. You're the accountable body as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, just from me, I'm just interested in what exactly, if this goes ahead, what are the tangible milestones that you actually see where you're going to involve this committee and stakeholders within the council moving forward? I'm not interested in, in 3 years we might come back and... what are you going to do in the next 6 months with the committee to try and bring them on board? And it's really for you, Natalie. You're the Chief of Staff. I understand you're responsible for corporate governance. What are you going to do? You're a corporate governance expert. What are you going to do to bring this committee with you over the next 6 months? And I think if the committee can hear that, I think people might start to feel a bit more comfortable. Thank you.
So just to be clear, and I think to just clarify earlier comments, this wasn't a full tender process, but the procurement process was followed through. But I don't think that's the substantive issue on that you're raising. It's around how do we move forward and how will we involve the committee moving on. So I think, just to reiterate, I don't want to get boring, that the services are transferring as is, absolutely as is. And what we really need to do then, as part of the process, as part of our engagement, our always on communication strategy and engagement strategy, is around how do we make sure that people are involved in developing those services. So I'm really happy to come back to every meeting of this and talk through what we are doing to engage with the population, to engage with yourselves, service users. I mean, some of that will be done through the providers, of course. That's very important, listening to the people who are in the services, so KMPT might want to come in on that. But they, like us, are absolutely committed to coming to this committee with those clear milestones. So I don't have it off the top of my head tonight, but I can set out over the next 6 months what those engagements events are going to be and how we can, and not just in this area, but in some of the other things we've had debates over as well, how we're going to engage the population and what that really looks like over those 6 months. Adrian, you wanted to come in?
Just to confirm, we have already been working very closely with the ICB on how we engage with the service users and the future service users. We will utilise everything that NELFT have already been doing with regards to that, plus also everything that we're doing within KMPT as well, in regards to our new engagement and involvement strategy as well. But we're more than happy to work with the committee on that as well to detail anything.
Thank you, Councillor Perfect. Look, I think, as you know, I always have lists of questions. I think you can tell tonight we're just really incensed about this. I am absolutely, actually disappointed would be the understatement, especially with you, Natalie, because we've had this conversation. We battled through and we got into a good position where we were moving forward in a transparent way. It's gone. It's gone. All of a sudden, it's just disappeared. Because, it's the same thing time and time again. The same thing happens time and time again. You're in I'm going to say a closed room. I'm not talking about this little room somewhere, but you're in a room, you make a decision, we're always the afterthought. And actually, I remember me and you having a conversation where you was really one of the most energetic people to say you wanted to bring us on this journey. Yet, we weren't on this journey. We weren't on this journey. Look, as far as I'm concerned, let me just ask you one question. I'm just going to ask you one question from the ICB, and I'm going to ask you guys one as well, because I'm not going to go through them all, because we just go round and round in circles. Remember, we're here for a reason tonight, and that's to decide whether this is an SV, and we will do that in a moment. But in your papers, in the ICB, I mean, the paper wasn't that great, really, right? So in your paper, because it's always guarded, it's always closed off, in your paper you say that pathways may change over time and that will require consultations and engagement. It's fair to say the service will change significantly, right? You can't sit there and tell me, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, Adrian, I'm not going to put you on the spot either, you're the chief nurse, but from years of experience, this service is going to change significantly when it comes over to you, because the way it's being run at the moment isn't great. And you all knew this. You all knew that NELF had problems. This isn't new. You should have had risk assessments in place, a risk strategy in place, not to have to quickly decide when they decide to bung it back to you because they've had enough, because they're in enough trouble as it is, the provider. You should have had a plan in place to go out to proper tender, to go out to proper selection. You didn't. You didn't have that in place. So just tell me, Natalie, or Jane, either of you, I'm going to say again, that you say in there pathways may change over time that will require consultation and engagement. The service is going to change, isn't it? Significantly. Or do you want the same is, which isn't great?
I do expect services to change.
But in your SV questionnaire, you're saying there's not going to be a change or a change of service. Let me just move on because we're going to go around. KMPT, you guys know, and I'm going to compliment you actually here this evening, because we had this, Adrian, didn't we? Time and time again, you've come back at this panel, you've been hammered by this panel, and you certainly did face it up, right? Because the reason we worked it out and the reason we got to where we want to be was because you was transparent. And you was upfront and you admitted where there was failures or decided where we needed to go. So I'm going to follow what Councillor Perfect and others have said. We're not blaming you this evening because you've been given this contract, right? But can you just tell me if from a KMPT must anticipate completing a restructure of this service, right? You're going to anticipate some form of restructure when it comes over to you, right? To align with your current service and your staff model, etc. You're going to bring it into your ethos, into your way of working. And I'm sorry to call you, I don't know if I'm allowed to call you KMPT anymore, but anyway, let me just carry on. But how would this change if some of them staff don't troop you over? What are you going to do if a lot of those staff decide not to come over to you? What's your backup plan? Because all we hear this evening is the current staff, there's no change, they're all qualified, which I'm sure they are. They're all qualified, they're all great, they know exactly what they're going to do, and then a load of them decide not to troop you or not to come over to you. Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do then, Adrian?
So first of all, I will acknowledge that we will continue to work with you to be as transparent as we can be. I think our first priority is to make sure that the transfer of services is as safe and as smooth as possible. And we've got plans, and I'm more than happy to provide those plans with what that transition looks like going forward. I think the other thing is the similarities in structures already within the children and young people's directorate at NELFT. It is a very similar structure to what we already have within KMPT. And so we're not anticipating any change in terms of that. So that will transfer over as is, and there will be a stabilisation period. Any changes that will happen will be done in line with the 10-year plan. And we're working through, everyone is working through what the 10-year plan means for them. We're not going to be making any drastic changes to the directorate, to the structure, the staffing, or to the services that our patients, the future service users are going to be receiving. I think we are managing very closely with all of the staff that are affected with this. The predominant amount who already live in Kent and work, within the existing services. We are working with them to address any of their concerns. We've done a series of briefings. We've done a series of questions and answers, and we're working very closely with getting those information. As of yet, we're still doing our due diligence in terms of that, in terms of the workforce that may have concerns, but we are doing the absolute utmost to make sure that any of their questions and concerns are addressed. From our point of view, those people who are providing a really a good service to the children and young people of Medway and Kent at the moment, they will continue doing exactly what they're doing with the encouragement to try and make things even better.
But Adrian, just going on from the question that our CYP colleagues asked you quite a few times, or didn't ask you direct, but asked through, there is a lack of children and young people experience in the service, and I'll take on board what you said, but I don't expect you to be, if no staff come over, I don't expect you to be out doing every clinic because you've got that experience, and I certainly don't expect your deputy CEO to be going out and covering clinics because a load of staff didn't bother to come over or they've gone sick. There is a distinct lack. If you took them staff away, there was a distinct lack of CYP experience within, and I think that's been recognised. That's in the report, that's been recognised. What's your backup plan?
So we run perinatal services across Kent and Medway. So we do have experience of working in the field in that way, just to be clear about that. The key thing for me is, in terms of the risk that you're presenting, some people might not come across the organisation. So there's some of the mitigation that Adrian's been talking about how we get engaged with the staff and think with them, well, why would that be the case? Why would you want to leave wonderful Medway and Kent and go and work in London, etc., and address some of their concerns? So we're actively dealing with that. It's clear that we have to keep a very close eye on that risk, and that's why over the months ahead, we're going to have to work very, very closely with those services and the staff within them to determine what the scale of that potential risk might be. Now, I'd be very happy to come back and talk to you about any emerging concerns around that and what we'd be putting in place to mitigate them. At the moment, we're just in we're in the foothills of that, if you will, and we're just finding our way and working out what we need to do next. It is a concern. It's always a concern nationally about staffing within children and young persons services, so I'm not naive to that. And I'm very aware that we've got a job of work to do to make sure that the disruption by changing in staffing would be as minimal as possible. And again, be very happy to share with you what we're doing to try and mitigate that.
And I think that goes to the point, and again, no, you know, I'm not having a go at KMPT here, but it's true what everyone has, including my vice chair, said as well, is that if there was a proper commissioning and procurement process, you would have made sure, Jane, I know, you would have made sure that any organisation you were looking at would have everything in place, ready to go and experienced to what they deliver. I'm not saying that KMPT can't deliver this, because we hope they can, because it's all our residents' children at stake here, and we want to be reassured of that. I don't think it's about the reassurance of you delivering to the service to them, the current delivery. I think it's the way it's happened. So you would certainly be called back, Andy, on that. Look, can I just close before we move to a decision, members, because we've got a big agenda. I think here we are again. Like I said at the very beginning, I think here we are again. And Jane, I'm not throwing you out there, but you know, and I appreciate your openness where you said there may have been a lack of openness in transparency in how we handled it. I'm not talking about your process. I'm talking about how you handled it. And there certainly was. It's extremely disappointing. I think you can feel that tonight. We are a body of councillors here that sometimes stakeholders do not realise how we can help and how we follow that journey with you and help you on your way. I think you just maybe think you come in here and we have a go at you and then you leave, right? But we can be really helpful, because it's true what Councillor Campbell said about we're the ones we've been voted on by our residents. And that's what we're here to, is protect them and to make sure they get the best services possible. I'm going to say again, you knew there was issues with NELF. You knew that. You knew things were going on. You knew there was problems. But the disrespect is clearly evident. And it's so disappointing. And Natalie, I want you to take it back, and I'm going to do a letter to the Chief Exec and the Chair. It's so disappointing that we have just, like Groundhog Day is the word, we've gone back again. And if Councillor Wildy would have been here tonight, you'd have had it from him as well. I know for a fact. Because when we think we're getting just that little bit further, then there's a trap, we fall through the hole, and then we're right back. We are right back at where we started. And that's really sad, because we were getting somewhere. And it's really sad because you know this isn't going to be the first time you'll come in here talking to us about SVs and about contracts, because we've got a whole community procurement going on. You're going to have to come back and talk to us about all of those contracts in the future. And at this moment in time, you've got no trust from the panel, from the committee. Certainly from my end, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of everyone else, but you haven't. But the main thing I'm going to say is what I do worry about is that you've also disrespected our young people in Medway and the issues that their family are going through, and they deserve better, and they deserve a more transparent process of how we serve them, or how your contracts, and Jane, I'm sure you're going to be able to make sure the contract is handled well and they do get what they need. But in this process, we've failed our young people, is where I believe. Can I move to, I'm recommending a substantial variation on this, because I clearly feel there's going to be a change in service. I clearly feel this panel doesn't have the confidence yet of how it's going to be delivered, but I'm sure KMPT will build that up with us. But I don't feel the engagement has been robust enough, and I don't feel the transparency of that engagement, especially with young people going through the process, has been as evident as I would have wanted it to be. Obviously, able to take account from you a counter recommendation, but I'm certainly recommending an SV for tonight, but entirely up to you. Opposition's votes, Councillor Perfect. Councillor Campbell.
I move that the committee note the update from the Kent and Medway Integrated Care Board as set out in Appendix 1 to this report. I also move that the committee does constitute the proposals as a substantial variation or development in the provision of health services in Medway because there has been insufficient transparency from the ICB about the whole procurement process.
Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Purvis. Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you. What we do is, Natalie, we're going to have to, I'll speak to Sarah, we're going to have to set up a meeting. And obviously, we'll wait and see what Kent says as well. We can say our own SV anyway, it doesn't matter, but we'll wait and see what Kent says on this process. But we'll have to get together and decide where we go from here. Thank you very much. I'm going to have just a 5-minute break, members. Thank you so much, our representatives from Children and Young People. Thank you for having another night out and having to come to a meeting. Thank you very much for your time. Quick break. Okay, handing over now to Dave, please. I'm going to ask you, Dave, to take items, both items together, by items 6 and 7, please.
Hang on, sorry, thank you, Chair. So these reports were presented to Cabinet on the 11th of February, and they summarise the budget monitoring positions that have been considered by Directorate Management teams based on returns submitted for the first round of, for item 6 for the capital budget monitoring and item 7 for the revenue budget monitoring. The significant issue is around the revenue monitoring, where there was a reported overspend across the Council of £10.9 million, and within that, the overall overspend for the areas within this remit of the committee, or the areas of this committee, are around £6 million. The committee should also note that Cabinet has instructed CMT to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within budgets. Happy to take questions alongside colleagues.
On item 6, yeah? Is this the item? On both?
Happy to take questions on both at the same time.
Any questions on items 6 and 7, please? Councillor Perfect.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I'm there. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My question is just, thank you, Dave, for introducing the report. My question is just to Jackie, probably, is the most appropriate person. Just in terms of obviously noting the significant pressure and, noting all the work that you and your team are doing, around the right sizing and all of the tremendous work that's ongoing. So thank you for that. Just in terms of that overall pressure, which obviously makes up the significant proportion of the Council's overall overspend, I'm just interested particularly in this piece around the 59 locums we've got in place. Just a little bit more information about that, please, and just sort of anything that sort of management action that's being taken at the moment to try and reduce that would be interesting. Thank you.
The numbers have actually reduced since we wrote the paper. I haven't got the information to hand. We've got that, but we're double checking it. We're just doing some validation around that. We've been successful recently, actually, in converting locums to permanent staff, and in addition, recruitment. So as we recruit into permanent posts, then we let the locums go. So the numbers have reduced. So I can do that. There was an ask for a briefing note at the last committee, so I can include that in that. So what we're looking at and what we do is we have direct conversations with them, talk to them about the benefits of becoming a permanent member of staff, the benefits around leave, bank holiday leave, pensions and so on and so forth. So there are some that we, after a bit of discussion, we will move across. There are some that are absolutely dedicated to becoming a locum. I think what's really key is that as a management team, we're really holding the line now. So people are seeing the change, and the conversations are actually as one person joins permanent, another one goes. And I think that's sort of starting to put a message across the division. With regard to the other pressures in the area, obviously we've got management action in about how can we reduce spend, and the report does talk about some of that. I think when I come to the hospital discharge paper later on, I can just sort of give a bit of a feel about why some of that is, some of the care costs are so expensive.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just thank Jackie for everything that she's doing in particular in this area, because I think, this is this is the most challenging area the Council's facing in terms of, financial position, and I note that the work that both her and her Directorate Management team are doing. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Perfect. We note that as well, thanks to Jackie as well. Yeah. Any other members? No other questions. Okay. Vice Chair, items 6 and 7 together, please.
Sorry. This committee notes with gratitude the work that Jackie Brown does in the Adult Social Care Department to secure the health and well-being of the residents of Medway. I move that the committee notes the results of the first round of capital budget monitoring and of revenue budget monitoring for 2025-26, and that the Cabinet have instructed CMT to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full Council.
Is that seconded, please, members? Seconded, thank you. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you very much. Thank you. Can I just say before I move on, if I can ask those for item 8 just to come up, please. Those for item 8, if you'd like to come forward, is that great? Thank you. Can I just welcome back Councillor Hamadashi as well? And we don't want to miss you, so we knew you was waiting outside with your declaration. And also, Councillor Crozer, can I just check with both of you that you had no declarations on the rest of the agenda at all for tonight? Is that okay?
I don't think I've got declarations, and apologies for being late. I had a puncture in Maidstone that I couldn't not get away from something.
No problem, thanks. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we now are moving over to the prosthetic limb service. Mark, we have a good relationship, us, don't we? We have a better relationship. You are from the ICB, so please don't feel overshadowed this evening, because one thing I will say is we've been through the battles here, but you are very transparent, and you always do contact when there's something on the radar. So we do appreciate that. The only thing, I don't know if you want to say something, there is a slight issue this evening, and please, I am going to let the Steepers introduce herself, because I don't want you just to think you've come just to, I bet after hearing that last night, I bet you'd be glad to go. But I think you remember, Mark, I did say that there's two issues. Number one, I do feel that this committee wanted this report back here when we had an exact location, for the mere fact being we definitely want it in Kent or Medway. We're not just about Medway, it's Kent or Medway. The second thing was that we were considering, should this be an SV? And if it was to be an SV, Mark, then we would probably send it to joint HOSC. So that, and for those that are not sure about the HOSC, it's where I sit with some other members here, but I sit with KCC's HOSC committee, and we have a joint committee together to look at, because obviously it's 80-20%, 80% Kent, 20% Medway. We look at, that doesn't stop us still doing an SV, but it looks good practice if we meet with Kent to see what they feel. I'm not saying it is going to be a substantial variation, but we'd also haven't had you fill out the questionnaire for that. So because we have to give you the chance to fill out the questionnaire to say why you think it won't be an SV. But just not to waste your time, we're not going to open to questions. But Mark, if you want to give us a bit of an introduction and maybe some reassurance, because you'll certainly be back again in the next meeting I know we've got apologies from the head of partnerships engagement at NHS England, who said that we wouldn't be knowing the location. It's a shame no one from there. I know she can't make it, but shame others couldn't come tonight. But you and I and this committee have always said in every pre-agenda meeting, we don't want this here until we know the location. Then we know whether we've got a problem or not. Mark.
Thank you, Chair, and nice to see people again. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues from the Hugh Streeper group, which I'll let them introduce themselves in 2 minutes. And I know we had a conversation where we were both keen to be able to come along tonight and identify or name the site. I think we can go some way towards that, Chair. So having spoken to Vicky, I think we've identified 2 potential sites, both within the radius or the catchment area that we described. I'm with you. I recognise that we want to retain this service within Kent and Medway. And I think with Darren and Vicky's help, we can continue to do that. We can deliver that service. I think it's a real opportunity to improve the service as well. Using or the opportunity for a new facility. I think there are some challenges around identifying that estate, because it needs to fulfil the 3 purposes. So it has to have a workshop so we can make changes to the prosthetics. It needs to have the outpatient setting, although when you read through the paper, a number of patients didn't want it to look like a hospital setting. So some kind of place where the clinicians can talk to patients. And then obviously it needs to have an admin function as well. I think there have been some challenges around identifying a fit-for-purpose building, but hopefully we will be there before the end of December. So I'm not able to offer you the full reassurance, Chair, but I think we are fairly close to being able to come back for the next one and give you the concrete plans of what that facility will look like. I think the other thing just to mention is the workforce as well. So we've done NHS England have done a considerable amount of engagement with patients. They letter shot 200 odd people. I think they had a 26% response back, which is reasonable. It's what we would consider to be acceptable. But equally, the there was an opportunity to engage with the staff and just understand what they would like from that new facility, because we recognise that retaining those services is really, really important. There's only about 20 members of staff that deliver those services, but they obviously hold key skills, and those skills will be difficult to find in the future. But I hope with Vicky and Darren's work, we can attract and we can encourage people to move to the facility, which might be in Aylesford or Maidstone. But look, I'm happy to hand over if you want to continue and ask some questions, Chair.
So what I don't want to do, although I do have a solution for, an offer for Vicky and Darren if they want to take it up, because it could be beneficial for you going forward. It sounds really bad, that, doesn't it? So what I'm saying is, because you're going to have to come back again, I don't want to ask the same questions we're going to ask when you come back again. And we do need you to fill out the SV. That doesn't preclude us, Mark, if you wanted to work with Terry and us, for us to have an informal session offline. It's not a committee session. It'd just be something maybe with Steve about what you do and your history and things like that, which would benefit the committee for the next time you come. Because I certainly always offer members the chance to have that, as you know, Mark, to have that offline chance. We don't always have the time. So I know you had a great presentation. I'm so sorry you had a PowerPoint already. We never have people have a PowerPoint already. So I'm so, present company, etc. I won't ever go to council, but we don't normally. So I do appreciate that, and I don't want you to think we just dismissed that. It's because of the technical thing, a couple of technical things we need to just jump through first. One thing I would want to make sure, Mark, before you come back, I'm sure members would agree, is that we're not going to have the same conversation around commissioning, direct commissioning, direct awards. You don't have to go into that tonight, but can we make sure that's not a substantial issue for the next meeting? Or if it is, let us know what.
No, yeah, it was a full tender process. I can assure you of that, having been on the other side of it.
Perfect. That's good. Okay, that's really good because it gets us onto that quickly. So that's really good. Mark?
If I could just come back, that would be really helpful. And I think, the search for the right estate continues, and if there are opportunities or something that you're aware of within your Medway catchment area that might help us to look at a second or a third option, then maybe that's something that we could discuss when we meet as well.
That'd be great. And I think all members would agree that the current, although they've done a great service, the current place, it wasn't fit for purpose, and anything modernised or anything better will be something great for our residents that use the prosthetics service. So so we'll move on. If that's all right, Vice Chair, Terry will contact you with the SV document as well. Vice Chair.
This committee agrees that SV documents will be completed and submitted, and a separate informal briefing for members of the committee will be organised about this particular service. Beyond that, I move that the committee notes the report.
Is that seconded, members? Seconded? Yeah, agreed? Agreed, thank you. Did you say December? Did you say you won't know the location or before?
We'll know the location within the next couple of weeks.
Perfect. So our next meeting is October. So, am I right? Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Can I ask Mike, Mr. Gilbert, to come forward, please? It's like in court here. Welcome, Mike. Welcome to tonight. We've got the item on the ICB Change 25, the ICB Transition Programme. So I did say we didn't want a long, because take the papers as read, but if you want to give us a little, just a brief, I think what would be really beneficial is just to highlight those timelines once more. And Mike, can I just check we're not in consultation? Is there anything we need to be aware of today for staff that are already going through consultation now or that?
No, we're not in formal staff consultation. I'll explain a little bit why in a second. It relates to the paper, and there's not a lot changed since the paper was drafted. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Gilbert, as it says on there. I'm the Change 25 Transition Director, which is the programme title that we're calling it within the ICB, which is part of a national programme of reducing the operating costs of integrated care boards by 50% by the 31st of December this year. That's on top of the 30% savings that we've had to make over the last 2 years. So it's a 65% saving in our operating costs. I need to be really clear at the front and at the outset of this, so hopefully it's clear in the paper. This does not impact on patient-facing services or on the services that the residents of Medway and wider Kent and Medway receive. This is about the running costs and the operating costs of running the organisation itself. You can imagine it's a really, really challenging programme, we've got the biggest agenda within NHS Kent and Medway that we've ever had in terms of the financial savings that we need to make this year and delivering, starting to think about how we deliver neighbourhood health and the 10-year plan. And at the end of the day, we've got just over 600 staff that work within our organisation, and the end of this is going to end up with circa 50% of those staff being made compulsory redundant, unfortunately, or redundant, whether it's compulsory or some of them take voluntary redundancy. It does present some good opportunities, absolutely, in terms of recognising there continues to be inefficiency within the NHS, and there are opportunities of working with the local authorities, working with our providers and with other integrated care boards to share and deliver services in a way that we've not necessarily done in the past. So there are some real opportunities with this as well, which I don't want to lose. But it also obviously suggests some real challenges for us in terms of living within the new financial plan. In terms of the timetable, so there are some risks and challenges within this, which I think probably make it more difficult for us at the moment. So one of the things, and again it says in the paper, is that for Kent and Medway, if we make circa 300, just over 300 staff redundant, that's going to result in a redundancy bill of just over £20 million. That's an estimated redundancy bill of just over £20 million. That's very similar to the other 41 ICBs across the country, so you can do the maths and see where that lands nationally. The Treasury have confirmed that they are not funding that, and that it has to be funded from within ICBs, the running costs, and actually how we run our organisation as well. And of course, but there are really strict requirements in terms of not being able to break the running cost budget within the organisation this year. And so, like many ICBs, we are in discussion with the Department of Health and Social Care about the affordability of this and when can we run this programme. Because there is a requirement to deliver this by the 31st of December, but in order to do that, we will go over our running cost allocation, which will require then a referral to Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State can make can do particular things, including make directions to ICBs. This is not confirmed, and this is just subject to sort of discussion at the moment, but the current planning assumption is that this may need to be done in 2 phases, where the executive team, the senior leadership team of the ICB is reorganised within the autumn of this year, and actually then the rest of the staff are done towards the end of this financial year so that it goes into the next financial year. What makes that more, how can you deliver the savings in the next financial year if you can't deliver them this year? If you make staff redundant towards the first part of the financial year, then you have 7 or 8 months of savings in terms of their pay that hasn't been funded that pays for the redundancy bill, and it virtually washes its face. Not absolutely, but it virtually washes its face. There's some opportunities with that. If we delay that timescale and that process, that allows us to continue to have conversations with Medway Council, Kent County Council, our partners, about other opportunities for sharing our services, a bit like we do with children's services with Medway Council in terms of the commissioning teams. But for me, and of course for our staff, any delay increases anxiety, increases uncertainty, and in essence puts all of those staff's life on hold in terms of until they know whether or not they've got a job and whether or not they're going to be, in terms of where they stand in the future. We have sought expressions of interest for voluntary redundancy, and as the paper says, we've just had over 100 people say that they would be interested in a voluntary redundancy programme if one was made available nationally, but we've not heard anything about that at the moment. So at the moment, we are continuing to work on our operating plan and our operating model. We are continuing to develop the structures and what our future functions look like. We are working on the basis, because the whole idea of this 50% reduction was an awful lot of services would need to transfer out of the ICB and either be taken back to the Department of Health and Social Care or done locally within our providers. we're working on the basis that we're going to have to hold on to those services for probably another 12 to 18 months because NHS England, Department of Health and Social Care may not be ready to take those services on. They may not be worked up hard enough. So again, living within that financial constraint, certainly for the next 18 months, is going to be extremely challenging for us. So a really, really challenging programme. I hope you see within the paper and towards the back end of the paper, my biggest priority is looking after this, outside of looking after patients within Kent and Medway, is looking after the staff within the organisation and making sure that we are as open and honest and transparent with those staff and we bring them on the journey. We bring them on the journey that they need to be brought on. And I'm not going to talk about it tonight because that's not the reason I'm here, but I heard it mentioned earlier. You'll have seen the cultural review that has recently come out about Kent and Medway in terms of the organisation, and we're not an organisation where we need to be, and we're not an organisation where we want to be in the future. So part of my role and the role of actually then I think this transition programme is around about how do we develop an operating model with our staff, not to our staff, that actually delivers an organisation we need to be in the future, recognising that the next probably 6 to 9 months is going to be a really, really difficult time. I'll leave it there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Just for an action to take away, is that the cultural review? I did ask the CEO and the Chair to send me the full document. I still haven't got it yet. So if you do have a copy, that'd be handy to send. Members, Councillor Hamadishi.
Thank you, Mike. And I understand it's a very challenging task indeed, trying to, balance up letting go of staff in this financial climate. But you're in a very unique and challenging situation here. One where, particularly across transformation, if you let go of the wrong staff member, you can cripple your service for the long term. What are you doing, in fact, to address, and I'll say for confidentiality, we call them Marys and Toms. How are you going to safeguard the people like Mary and Tom who do the work diligently, who do not shout the loudest, but they have a deep sense of knowing what their role is? Then they can connect services to services. They have a deeper understanding of what's required. The reason being is typically when we cut without considering the quieter ones, the ones that don't make the noise, all of that I mentioned goes out of the window. And although they're not patient-facing, you, as a byproduct, you will increase patient safety concerns because the general public also gets sniffed that your service is not safe because the key people are not working within the service. So what are you doing to seek out those people who are not going to shout the loudest, who have this knowledge base, so that when you transition to the new state, you retain that knowledge and understanding for the new service?
Thank you, Councillor. Really, really important point, because there is the risk. There's the risk in terms of with voluntary redundancy as well, because usually those staff that are excellent know they can get jobs elsewhere, and they may well therefore apply for voluntary redundancy, whereas others might not do that. So it's a really, really important point. There's not one particular action that we're taking with that, because there's also, when you make more than 20 people redundant, there are very, very, and I'm certain many people around this table will know there's very strict rules in terms of consultation processes and the redundancy process and the objective nature that you have to take rather than the subjective nature of who you select for redundancy rather than select for staying. But we are working extremely hard at the moment through, in terms of the support packages and the arrangements in place, working with our senior leadership team and our line managers to work with staff in terms of encouraging them to come forward and identify themselves in terms of being people that want to actually work within this organisation. So we're doing a lot of work in terms of generally working with our staff and actually working with our line managers and that to say what are the key elements of work and what are the key staff and what are the key functions that we need to retain within the organisation and not let go of. It's a really, really important point, but it's a balancing act in doing that in terms of making sure with our unions as well and with our staff networks that we don't cross the boundary into what they might perceive as preferential treatment as well. It's absolutely one of those things that's in my mind though, Councillor. So in terms of, and in the organisation's mind, you've had two conversations this evening, one rather challenging and one not, and both of those are to do with, as you say, they're to do with patient-facing services ultimately, and we are the organisation that commissions that. So losing corporate memory and losing the good staff that are back in the office that are delivering that on a day-to-day basis is going to be absolutely critical. Otherwise, as you say, the organisation will be on its knees for a number of years.
Councillor Perfect.
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank you, Mike? I mean, I know we've met a number of times over various things. I always find you extremely direct, positive and optimistic, so it's really good. And I appreciate the difficulty that that you've been landed with this from the Department of Health and Social Care. And I know how challenging it is actually in terms of the wider landscape, change of government. It's very difficult. And I do hope at some point in the next few years we might get to a position where there's actually some long-term continuity in some of this. The change to CCG to ICBs, and we've got this going on now. We've got NHS England being about, it just never seems to stop. But hopefully at some point you might be able to get a bit of stability. I'm just interested in terms of noting what the chair was saying, just about obviously the news reports about the culture and the change and concerns from staff and whistleblowers and HR and all of the stuff that I was just reading again, the recent article in the medical journal, with concern, reflecting on some of those concerns. I'm just interested and I appreciate you're not necessarily a HR expert, but I'm just interested from an organisational development and a HR perspective, how you're putting your employees at the heart of this discussion, because I think, and there are, majority of your workforce live in Kent and Medway. They are our residents too. I'm just interested in terms of how you're communicating that and how, as you move forward, restructuring the organisation, how you're going to sort of drive that as a, noting obviously once you've dealt with the redundancies and dealt with the challenging part, how you're then going to sort of move the organisation forward and bring that together as one sort of cohesive force, because I think sometimes organisations sort of get lost in the process, very focused on the redundancies and obviously the challenges around that, which is very important, but then lose sight of the rest of the organisation and the impact that all of that has, particularly with this, where we've got, we're not talking about an insignificant number of people within the workforce, with a workforce that already, noted through independent reports and in the press has got significant organisational cultural challenges. So I'm just interested in terms of how that's being brought together and what support you're receiving from other colleagues within your executive leadership, the chief executive, but also from colleagues in the board, and if you're comfortable with the level of challenge that you think there is around that. Thank you, Chair.
Mike.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll take that question sort of in three parts or three phases. When we made the previous saving, so we had to make 30% savings in a program that we called Be the Best previously, which was as I say, that reorganisation over the last 2 years. That didn't go well. I think that there are lessons to be learned in terms of how that was, in my personal view, a sort of a top-down reorganisation and restructuring to make those 30% savings. And the lessons that were, and I think some of the issues identified in the cultural review, a number of those come from the mistrust within the organisation around about the reorganisation and the outcome of that. As an executive, as a board, and in fact, and some of the issues, of course, because the cultural review was independently commissioned by the board, recognising there were concerns within the organisation, and some of that was to do with Be the Best. So in undertaking the Change 25 programme, I've been really clear as the transition director, and that's working alongside my exec colleagues, the chief exec, the chairman and the board, that we need to do this differently and we need to do this with our staff. I've established a colleague insight and involvement group that has members of staff from every directorate, from every pay band within the organisation, and from all of our unions and all of our networks, to actually work with myself and others in developing and designing the operational model going forwards. Part of the operational model going forwards has got to be around about what are the values and the behaviours and the way we go about doing our business. So there's an obvious linkage, therefore, into the cultural review and actually taking forward the cultural review outcome and recommendations. And actually, there are 63, 64 suggestions from staff in terms of how we can make NHS Kent and Medway a better place to work, and we're currently looking at those. The board will be looking at those over the next couple of weeks and how they take those forward. In terms of the culture, so that's happening anyway, and there was a question mark about whether we use that insight and involvement group to also take forward the changes within the cultural review. Because there's such a specific piece of work in terms of doing the Change 25 and the transition programme, I've wanted to keep that slightly separate. So we have set up, and we are establishing at the moment, and we're just finalising that, a similar group of staff to absolutely look at taking forward the recommendations of the cultural review itself. So again, made up of a similar representation of the organisation. The chair and the chief executive are absolutely personally involved in that, as are members of our board. Our board member, we've got a champion for freedom to speak up, an independent member on our board, Liz Butler, and she's also very much focused on that, as is our vice chair, who's also the chair of our people committee. So we've got a lot of independent, non-executive scrutiny on our board in order to actually oversee the Change 25 programme, as well as alongside the cultural review.
Councillor Printer.
Yeah, thank you. To be honest, most of my questions have been answered, and I'm glad to hear that it's not just been executive-led, because a lot of the time the workforce just feel that, but the executives and the executives are going to make the decisions that suits them best. And also I'm glad to hear that you're involving the trade unions as well. It sounds great that 100 odd people would take voluntary, but they might not necessarily be the right people that you need to go, because you've still got an organisation to run. So it's just making sure, how you're going to make sure that the organisation can still function and you don't make them wrong choices when you're potentially getting rid of 49% of 770 people. That is quite challenging. And the morale of the staff, I imagine, during that period is going to be awful. So getting those to still do the day-to-day work that they need to do, the key work they need to do, it's a challenge, and I'm not sure, what you've got in place for that.
So with voluntary redundancy, actually the organisation can determine the criteria as well as the individual. So just because somebody volunteers for redundancy doesn't mean to say, right, okay, they're made redundant. So the organisation will look at the operational requirement and the operational need within the organisation as to whether we can afford to let somebody go from the organisation. Now again, we've got strict criteria that we need to work through with our unions on that to make sure that that's really equitable. And throughout this process, one of the things I haven't said is that we will do equality impact assessments. We've already done a baseline one at the very beginning of this, and as we go through various stages, we do another equality baseline assessment and another one, both equality and inequalities. So to look at the direct impact on our staff, but going back to the earlier question, is there an indirect impact on the services that we're commissioning as well? So we've got that in place to try and make sure that we retain our operational credibility within the organisation. You're absolutely right, though, about the anxiety levels. And as we go through this, and we're starting to get into the thick of this now, as I said in the paper, the silent anxiety, and there has been sort of like, there has been a feeling, and it's been really positive in terms of the feedback that I've had and other people have had within the organisation of this does feel different, that you are doing this different to be the best, and the previous CCG reorganisation as well. We're only as good as today, and if we mess it up tomorrow, we won't be thanked for that. So my view is to keep on speaking to staff regularly, to do weekly blogs and to do other things that keeps them on board, even if there's not much to say, just telling them what we're doing and where we are, and being really honest. So being really honest with the delays, saying what's in our control and what it is that we need to do, and if there's something not in our control, being honest about that, whilst being sensitive to them about that, but being honest about that as well, rather than trying to cover it up.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Also, just for staff, if you're losing your job, it sounds lovely, be the best and tagline. Everything needs a branding. I know. But, no one hates, if you're losing your job, you don't want a branding gimmick sort of thing.
And somebody's, so we called it Be the Best before. In hindsight, this shouldn't probably been the right one, but I've called it Change 25. Somebody's said to me earlier today, is this going to be Change 25, 26, 27? So we shall see on that, but I'll be held to that.
Leanne, do you want to come in?
Thanks for the paper, Mike. It is a challenging situation, there is no doubt about that, but I just wanted to draw members' attention to 3.37 and thank our Medway Council HR colleagues who looked at this issue and came up with some sort of helping hand that we could extend to the ICB and staff. And of course,
the back of my mind, Mike, if the best of your staff choose to leave or you make a mistake, then they may be welcome in Medway. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. And on a serious note, absolutely, thank you and appreciate both Medway Council and other organisations for saying that we hear that what's happening within NHS Kent and Medway. It's also happening in a number of our providers in terms of the back office staff. They've also got to make similar reductions in the growth that they've had, so it's not of the same scale, but they're still making the same reductions. And the help and support of both public and non-public sector organisations in, seeing how they might be able to support what we have is fantastic staff within the organisation if, as and when they're let go from the organisation. I mean, hopefully that will be as painless as possible, but it is going to be difficult.
Thank you, Mike. And Medway Council or whatever that council may be, if it goes to 27, 28, you never know. Let's hope not. Let's hope not for the staff. Mike, can I just confirm it's executive down, right? It's not. This isn't just to be clear. It's executive level down. Is this reorganisation, isn't it? It's not just staff at certain levels.
It's from the board down. So actually, we do expect there to be reduction in the board members as well. So our non-executive and our board members, absolutely the executive chair, as well as what we've said to everybody. Because again, when the rules come out, people then start to say, "Well, I'm not involved." There's a reason why it doesn't need to be my team, isn't there? We've said that there are no sacred cows in this. We're going to need to, this is but absolutely includes the exec and the board.
And just following on from all the members' contributions, the risk is high, isn't it? There's a high risk here. How are you managing that? It must be really difficult, Mike. It's not very often that I feel sorry for you, but I do today because I think we're all here for the staff and we all feel for the staff and want what's best for them during a really difficult time. So, and by the sound of it and for what Councillor Brent asked you, them support structures are in place for those going through this now. But how are you managing the risk factor is what people are saying to you if you lose those elements. I know you sort of answered it, it's just I want to hear, the risk is extremely high. The damage, I don't think you're nowhere near. I was part of those, not part of it, I was here scrutinising those awful previous reorganisations, CCG one for a start. But, how are you managing that away from, as well as looking after the staff? How are you managing us providing, which everyone's asked you, us providing that vital service to our residents?
It is difficult. So, yeah, absolutely. It remains difficult. We've got, as I say, a staggering agenda this year. Every year the NHS and local authorities have huge agendas. This year it's just like eye-watering in terms of things like financial savings we need to make to balance the books, etc. One, I'm a dedicated person. We've got a dedicated PMO, and I'm working very closely, as you can imagine, with our HR and our OD team, so that we are focused solely on looking after the staff and the Change 25 programme, whilst we've also got, and I work hand in glove, so part of my PMO are also the representatives from our wider programme management office that are focused on delivering the absolute business of the organisation. The Change 25 programme is high on our board assurance framework, so it's literally reviewed at our board assurance meeting, our executive team meeting on a regular basis. And we review, for example, so at the moment we're doing internal redeployments and secondments within our organisation to make sure there are no gaps within the specific particular areas that we've got. Our turnover rate at the moment, he says, touching wood, is low, and actually quite low, and our sickness absence rate is low, but I do expect that to change as we go through this year. So it's constant scrutiny, I think, Chair, and just being on the ball and early on the ball to be making changes and to be agile to making those changes. And also working, the other thing that I haven't said, but we are working really closely with the other ICBs in the South East region as well. Now that's not about using our staff, but it's around about sharing intelligence. And if something's going off in another ICB, us being really quick to go, right, okay, is there something within our ICB we need to look at? So, that's the best it's going to be. It's absolutely not risk-free. So I think that there are going to be some trips in the way. The issue is about how we respond to them.
Thank you, Martin. Just two quickly brief ones. You don't have to answer the second one if you don't want to. The first one is, well, you should do, I should ask you, but the first one is, so is it board-led and executive-led, or is it executive-led that then reports to board, the plan with you? The second one is, what support are you getting from the Department of Health?
So there is a subcommittee of the board that actually oversees this. So we've got a dedicated transition committee which is made up of the non-executive members and the chief executive, chief finance officer, chief people officer within the organisation, and I report to that as the lead officer, and this is meeting on a 3-4 weekly basis at the moment, and then through that provides assurance to the board in terms of the overarching assurance. We're working closely with NHS England in terms of what are the options at the moment. I mean, it's really difficult for everybody at the moment in terms of the finances. I have raised concerns that, I would like clarity and certainty as soon as possible, as soon as we know the outcome in terms of when we might be able to, are we going to get the funding to be able to run this or the authorisation to run it this financial year, or are we going to need to do the majority of it next financial year? Once we know the outcome of that, we can then start properly planning, and I can say to staff, like, this is the timescale. And I think that's what staff want. They'd rather it sooner rather than later, but what they don't want to know is not know a date. If I was to say to them that the consultation's going to start, I don't know, I'm making this date up now, but the 25th of January, they'd be better knowing that than not knowing anything at the moment, and that's the bit that we're working through with NHS England and DHSC.
Thank you, Mike. So, my final comments are exactly what Leanne said. I'm glad you're using Medway. I'm sure Medway's team would always help as well. And on a personal note, although you didn't hear nice things earlier, on a personal note, I think they've put the right man for the job. So I know you will look out for all the staff because that's in you. You've been there for long. You've been around for, I'm not going to say for a long time, Mike. You've been around for a while, right? We're here to support as best we can. Vice Chair. Councillor,
sorry, that's okay. I didn't put my hand up earlier, Chair. Just, I think my colleagues have done a good job of looking at the strategic view over workforce and organisational change. I think from the operational perspective, when the 3 tiers of services to be retained, services to be transferred, and some of them are to be kind of assessed as to where they will sit. And for me, there are some things like SEND, for example, which at the best of times suffer from lack of proper categorization because it goes across so many different service lines and they tend to be kicked around a bit. And I think service users sometimes miss out. So when this massive transformation is happening, my concern would be, because they're already kind of on the lowest of the tiers, that nobody knows where they're going to sit. Are they going to be retained? Are they going to be transferred? So I just wanted to raise that as a flag. How would you safeguard those services? Because it might not, at an organizational level, they might not rank very high, but for the people who are living with those conditions, it's life-changing.
I think it's a really important question, and actually when we're looking at those services it's quite the opposite. They rank really high. So actually when we look at the percentage reduction that we need to make across the organisation, and we say we've got to make an average 49-50% reduction, in some functions we're saying we can only afford to make 10, 20, 30% reduction because they're so critical services, particularly safeguarding, SEND, those sort of areas, which means that other functions might need to make a 70% reduction. But we do look at that. The other thing is actually with those particular services, the ones that you mentioned, which are therefore exploring, there's a national programme now that's hopefully going to report within the next few weeks, which has done much more detailed work over the last couple of months. I've not been involved with it, and we're waiting for the outcome, which is giving more of a view on what should we do with infection prevention control, SEND services, safeguarding services, and all-age continuing care. So I think we will probably get more direction on that from the centre, recognising that they are probably 4 of the most critical, 4 of the most important services in terms of the most vulnerable in our society.
Thank you. I do echo Councillor Perfect's wish for stability and clarity for the ICB through this process. I move that the committee notes the report.
Seconded, members? Seconded? Got a second? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Take care. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to item 10. We've got Ailish and we've also got Daniel and Jackie. Taking the paper as read, I hope. Did you want to just introduce briefly?
It would be extremely briefly. Absolutely taking the paper as read. The work that's been going on developing the strategy has been happening over the last 18 months. At the same time, there's been an awful lot happening at a national level in terms of Get Britain working, and that's why Dan's very kindly agreed to come along tonight, because what we've actually been doing as we've been developing that strategy is make sure that we're dovetailing that with the Get Britain working and the other national policies that are being developed as well. So Jackie is here as the key author of developing the strategy itself, and Dan to be able to give us some input around Get Britain Working too.
Thank you, Ailish. Any members, please? Questions on this paper? Councillor Perfect.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you, Eilish, and can I thank the whole team, Daniel and Jackie here. I think this is a really comprehensive piece of work, actually, and I think it's really important given the challenges that the white paper outlined, actually. And I was just looking just a few minutes ago back at the white paper in the announcement, around some of those headline figures, 9 million people economically inactive, 1.5 million people unemployed, 2.8 million people out of work due to long-term sickness. I think it's very much evident that this work is particularly important. And when you look within the report, in terms of the figures within Medway as well, some of those highlighting significant challenges. So I guess my question is, and I'm particularly interested in figure 1 on page 80, which is just regarding embedding LGBWP, quite snappy title, into the sort of the Kent and Medway context. And I'm just interested in terms of how we sort of view, a couple of questions actually just around this, but firstly just in terms of how we think we can sort of embed this across the council, this approach. So what work has been undertaken within Medway, not only within obviously the Public Health Directorate and obviously your work, Dan, within adult education, etc., but also within other wider services that are offered by the Place Directorate in particular. Just thinking about some of the services that they deliver. That's probably my first question. My second question is just regarding partners and just particularly business, sort of how we're driving some of these conversations and some of the business conversations. I note, Anne's team and the work that Sunny, etc., are doing over in terms of driving some of that sort of local employment, etc. Very positive. I'm just interested in sort of how this is feeding in with that. And I guess my third question is just about local government reorganisation. Obviously, we've got that context, moving very fast. I'm just, and obviously, just interested in terms of wider conversations that we're having both with councils, other district councils, and also obviously noting that this is sort of a joint strategy, particularly those districts, how we're sort of seeing that sort of moving together at that level as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll probably share the answers across this, if that's okay. I'm going to work backwards, if that's okay. So looking at LGR in the first instance. So as you can see from that figure that you've got on page 80, what we have established is a new strategic partnership for health and economy. It's co-chaired by David and Kent Public Health and that's it, thank you. The chair of KMEP itself. We do have district representation on that board as well, and we also engaged with the districts in the development of this strategy as well. So it is really a Kent and Medway wide piece of work, which we believe will survive through the LGR process as well, because it's had that buy-in across the whole partnership. In terms of working with partners and businesses, again, hopefully you'll have seen from the paper that we did engage a lot with businesses and employers in the development of this strategy. It certainly informed some of the key aspirations within that as well. We also had a recent discussion about it at Health and Wellbeing Board, because what we did hear from a lot of businesses is that they are frightened of doing the wrong thing, and they're frightened of falling foul of the legislation. So there is work to be done in terms of how we share knowledge, training, and make employers feel more comfortable supporting in this space. And we've got some really powerful case studies as well that we'll be able to include that demonstrate where businesses have been able to do that and the added value that comes from that. I'll let Dan pick up a bit more, because obviously the work around how we're embedding across the council and how Great Britain Working is working within the council.
Yes, thank you for the questions. I think just to carry on the business question, that's really important, and that work never stops. So within my team, we do quite a bit of employer engagement. And one of the really key things we've tried to do over the last 18 months, 2 years, is make sure when we go and see a business, we have sort of bespoke, tailored business skills plans with them. And that covers every aspect of our work, and trying to make sure if a business asks us about apprenticeships, we go with the full offer and not just talk about apprenticeships. And what's really key in terms of business engagement is that when we're talking about supporting people with health condition or through the Connect to Work programme, we're not asking businesses to do us a favour and take someone on. These are people who can add a huge amount to your business and to your workforce. So that's really key and something that we're keen to keep pushing. Connect to Work is now live, so that's a new large-scale employment scheme which helps people with disabilities and health conditions and other disadvantaged groups. So that is a lot of this in action. That launched in June, so pretty fresh, but starting well. So that'll be a key element there. And then in terms of working across Medway and wider services, so we've got the Medway Skills Partnership Board, which is internally focused, and that makes sure we have representatives from key services across the council looking at all the key skills issues, and this has been an early, real key agenda item as part of that. I think we've got really good buy-in. I think I've been very blessed by my colleagues to give really good buy-in to sort of the skills and employment agenda across the council. So fairly well embedded. This work has been great with public health. I don't think I've ever worked so closely with public health and very much enjoying it. So long may that continue.
And sorry, the only other thing I would add in terms of partners and businesses is one of the other things that we're looking at as part of the action plan is whether there's more that we as anchor institutes can do to support those businesses, sharing policies, sharing processes, and seeing whether there's sort of mutual aid that we can offer across the employing businesses as well.
So just on the strategic partnership, we have also got Tudor Price from the Invicta Chamber. So he's been very valuable in contributing the voice of the small and medium enterprises, because we recognise that that's a big factor. And again, going back to the work on the anchor institutions and how we can set some case studies, some good practice that can be shared. And actually, there's a lot of good practice around that we can share and make available to other people. And the other bit, just embedding in the council, is of course the Healthy Workplaces programme that Public Health run already. So that has a really huge sort of leverage in a lot of businesses across Medway.
That's very good. Thank you, Chair.
Any more members? Councillor Shocker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my question is a little bit of concern, but forgive me if I'm wrong. You've commissioned Evolve Kent for the lived experience insights. They've come back with 42 people. Of these 33 participants were interviews, and only 9 participants took part in a focus group. How sure are you these are reflective of the population? And obviously, therefore, how much impact could this potentially have on the strategy that they've had an input? Because from experience, 9 participants in a focus group doesn't necessarily mean that's enough, I don't think. Unless I'm wrong on how you've approached this one.
I'll start and then I'll let Jackie fill in the holes that I leave with my answer. So there was a significant amount of work done around surveys and engagement from the broader population. And what we were able to do from that was identify some harder to reach groups that maybe hadn't engaged, or some groups that we felt weren't represented. And that was where Involve Kent came in to be able to do some very targeted work with some groups that we felt we hadn't heard their voices. Jackie, is there more that you want to?
Yeah, so the work that Involve did actually included 42 participants who all took part. But what they did was to make sure that the manner in which they engaged those participants suited what they preferred. So some of them were individual interviews, and some of them took part in focus groups. So the 9 took part in focus groups, but the other 33 or so, if I got my maths right, had individual interviews, and some of them were verbal and some of them were written, depending on how they wanted to engage. And as Eilish says, we did last summer, we talked to 115 stakeholders through various focus groups and interviews that then formed the draft strategy. And then we had a public consultation online survey, which took in 336 responses between January and March. And then Involve's place was to look at some of the gaps we had. So more ethnic diversity, looked after children, younger people, some of the areas of Kent and Medway that weren't
as represented in the public consultation. So there were 42 in there. So the other part of it is that with the strategic partnership, health and the economy, we're also in the process of setting up a lived experience reference group. So that reference group will be supported by voluntary sector. It will go out to a tender process. They will be able to support the work that the strategic partnership does by giving their voice and their feedback to the discussions that are held in those partnership meetings and the work that the partnership does. So we don't see it as the engagement is done and dusted by any means. We expect that to go on because the landscape is changing, the system is changing, and we need to keep abreast of that. We need to keep people's views on hand all the time. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, it assures me in terms of the continuous engagement. I was just a bit concerned that might not be the current engagement you've done may not be reflective as it should be, but obviously you might have assured me it is, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Sugar. Councillor Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think this is brilliant. I love it. The only thing I suppose I have a worry about is that, because I have been around these sort of things before, is that sometimes with employers, we can go in and sometimes it's a honeymoon period where everybody is enjoying it and it's exciting, and sometimes the employers can over-promise, and then as time goes on and the employment carries on, it can sometimes start coming apart where they can't keep up that level of promise, and the person finds that they then haven't got that level of the enthusiasm was keeping them going, if that makes sense, and then the disability can start becoming more apparent, and we sort of see this seesaw effect. So I just feel like we need to be supporting the employers and being realistic at what can actually be given, and their safeguarding involved with the disabled person or the young person, because I have seen it happen a couple of times that after a year things can start falling apart, which then leaves both parties. The employer doesn't want to take on anyone else, and then the disabled person decides that they're going to go and they can't cope with work like they thought. So it's just that balance and making sure that no one's over-delivering in the honeymoon period.
Daniel, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Really valid point, Councillor Jackson, thank you. One of the key things on Connect to Work is it's using two models, supported employment and IPS, and they are both models that involve in-work support, not necessarily for a year. So I appreciate what you're saying about the honeymoon period and then lasting longer for a year. But as part of that in-work support from the job coaches, it's making sure everything is set up so that hopefully there won't be an end to that honeymoon period, because everything's embedded and working well before they fade and leave that placement to sort of continue, or that employment to continue successfully. And that will generally be, there's normally a defined time period, but that can be as long as it takes. So if things aren't working particularly well or there's challenges, they'll stick around until that's sort of resolved. And likewise, if someone starts a job and then falls out of that employment, they can come back to the programme, and we can look at what went wrong and work again. And again, it's really important that every relationship with an employer is a relationship, so that actually they feel they can pick up the phone and saying, actually, we're really struggling here, and then we can go back in and put some support in place to reignite that passion that was there in the first place.
Thank you, Daniel. I've got no other members. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, it's just an observation, really, on reflection, really. What do you think you've learnt from the process and setting the 4 aspirations? And if you were doing it again now, would you make any changes or anything that you've learned through the whole process? I mean, I think it's a fantastic report, really good, really thorough, but it's always an automatic question that comes to mind. If you did it again, would you change the questions? Would you change the aspirations?
I mean, I think it's been quite an iterative process because it's not a strategy that's been developed overnight, because we've had that sort of stakeholder engagement and public consultation and then the focus groups. It has certainly been developing as we've gone. I don't think the aspirations have changed significantly as we've gone through that process, but we've probably refined them more and thought more about what the ambitions underneath them need to be. If I'm honest with you, the real challenge is the now what. That's the real challenge now. So, you know, we've got a significant amount of work through the Get Britain working, the Get Kent and Medway working, the Connect to Work. There are also other, one of the things that we uncovered as we were doing this work is there is actually quite a lot out there, but it's not necessarily well coordinated, it's not necessarily well communicated. So I think for me, the challenge is now, how do we now translate this into action? How do we make those aspirations come to life? How do we not just rely on Get Britain working and Connect to Work, but look at all 4 aspirations and what we're going to do around that? And that's the bit that I think there'll be a lot more learning as we go forward. But in terms of the strategy, I think the ambitions were fairly evident quite early on. Actually, those aspirations were fairly evident quite early on and didn't change significantly through the process.
Thank you, Ailish. Can I, Leanne?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I think that the beauty of this is the amount of consideration around support about the people-centred approach, because you have to have a certain amount of confidence to make it in the world of work. And I often find it is the little things, and I'm saying little things probably to people like you and me, not having £3 for the bus, so you can't get there today. You know, having a cross word with someone in the workplace, or, you know, feeling you've let yourself down, all of those things really knock people back. And I think that person-centred approach has really tried to grapple with some of those issues, because what we want is confident people in the workforce, otherwise it won't work. So, yeah.
Thanks, Leanne. Daniel, did you want to come in just briefly?
Yeah, very, very quickly, just to note that we've recently been doing the Get Kent and Medway working plan, and that took a slightly different approach and slightly different angle and slightly different process, but the aspirations and the priorities are incredibly similar. So I think absolutely right, the aspirations are correct. It's what comes next, that'll be the real challenge.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Gilborn, for that. Can I just say, excellent report. You can tell you didn't have so many. You had some really good questions. We didn't have a whole raft of them coming at you, because you answered everything in the plan. I thought it was a very, very exciting paper, and it's one of those ones that you really want delivered, because even just a little bit could help that one person go where we wanted to go. So well done on that report. It's excellent, and thank you, Ailish, as well. Vice Chair.
I move that the committee recommends the Kent and Medway Integrated Work and Health Strategy 2025 to 2030 as set out at Appendix 3 to the Cabinet for approval.
Seconded? Seconded, members? Okay, agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you both for your time. Thank you, Ailish. Now moving on to item 11, we've got the Pharmaceutical Needs Assessment. We've got Mark as well from the local Pharmaceutical Council coming up. Welcome, Mark. David, obviously, you're going to take the very, very in-depth long report as read. There's a lot of pages there, but if you just wanted to highlight at the very beginning anything you wish to highlight. A brief highlight, David.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. I'll just give Mark a few seconds to sit down. So yes, so as Dan said, Mark is from the local Pharmaceutical Committee, and will be joining me in answering your questions. So the Pharmaceutical Needs Assessment, PNA, tells us what pharmaceutical services are currently available and where we're likely to see changes in the future. The The provision of NHS pharmacy services is a controlled market, so you can't just set up a pharmacy whenever you want to. If someone wants to set up a pharmacy, they are required to apply to the NHS to be included on the pharmaceutical list and must prove that they can meet a pharmaceutical need. NHS England relies on the P&A to inform its decision-making, specifically regarding whether existing pharmaceutical services meet local need. It's important to note that the P&A is not an assessment of the quality of services. That's out of scope for the P&A. And it's also important to note the current context in which pharmaceutical services are being delivered. Nationally, the community pharmacy sector has workforce challenges and financial pressures. The rate of store closures for 2024 was higher than in previous years. And this is mainly due to a combination of funding and workforce challenges. A recent report commissioned by NHS England found that around 47% of pharmacies were not profitable in their last accounting year. So it's a very difficult financial situation that they're in. So therefore, market stability is a very important consideration when we are considering the pharmaceutical needs assessment and delivery of pharmacy services. So I'll finish there with the introduction and hand over for questions.
Members, anything on the pharmaceutical needs assessment? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, David. It's interesting to hear what you just said. So how do you strike the balance between the financial constraints of the pharmaceutical industry market and the actual needs of the general public, services that they want to see delivered at pharmacies? That's my first question. The other one I wanted to ask about was the outsourcing of the actual needs assessment process. I'm curious to see how other authorities, local authorities, do this. Is it common practice to outsource such an assessment process? And then what is the cost attached to that, please? Thank you.
Can you just repeat the second question? I didn't hear about outsourcing.
I'm just interested in how other local authorities approach this assessment process. Is it common practice for them to outsource this?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll take that first. So yes, it's, there are very strict rules around how this needs to be done. And it is very
David,
common.
can you just bring your mic up to you? Is that right?
Sorry,
because
yes.
you're turning everyone. Yeah, cheers.
Sorry about that. Yes, so it's very, there are very strict rules around how a pharmaceutical needs assessment needs to be done, and it's very common for local authorities to contract it out. In fact, I don't know of anyone who doesn't do that, because you need very specialist pharmaceutical advice. And your first question around balancing the need with availability. Yes, it's tricky, it's a challenge. So the financial environment in which pharmacies work has changed over the years. And therefore it is now much more difficult to have large numbers of pharmacies close together because there's too much competition that causes market instability. And then I might hand over to Mark to talk about that in a bit more detail.
Yep. Thank you for the invite today, and I've worked very closely with David and team, so I really appreciate the tireless amount of work that's gone into the P&A to make it what it is today. It is a very challenging time for community pharmacy, and the economic review that David referenced indicated that the amount of money we're using to operate pharmacy is a lot higher than the amount of money we're getting. And negotiations happen nationally with the NHS England, so that we have the Community Pharmacy England that negotiate on behalf of community pharmacies across England, and they do that with the NHS and Department of Health and Social Care. So that's where the funding model comes into play. We recently had a funding negotiation that happened beginning of this year, where we had some funding uplift, but as a sector we've had over 2 billion worth of shortfall chronic underfunding. And if you think back when we had COVID and disruption in supply chain, we haven't had any increase in funding in terms of the amount of the medicines we're dispensing to patients. So everything stayed pretty much the same, and that was impacting the profitability of a lot of our pharmacies. So the government have changed the funding model slightly, moving away from solely dispensing prescription and also to move into clinical services. And they put a little bit of money on that. But what they've done also is not increase the funding pot significantly for the dispensing items. And there's still chronic issues with the supply chain and drug shortages that is still impacting us currently.
Sorry, sorry if I'm kind of laboring the point a bit, just so I understand. So if there is a particular need, so the context of this is so many more services are being moved to the pharmacy because you've got the pharmacy first sort of approach now. So like you said, so much more than just dispensing drugs. So if in the community there is a lack, I don't know, I just had my blood pressure read last night, so I'll use that as an example. You don't say there is a need for more places where people can have their blood pressure read. And there's a need for that, but the pharmacy actually is cash-strapped, like you're describing. So what takes precedence then? How do you hit that balance?
There are two elements to it. One is essential service. So essential service is around dispensing prescriptions. And we look at the sign-up across the board. So we currently monitor the sign-up of the advanced services, so things like blood pressure check, contraception service, and monitor the uptake, and work closely with the ICB to look at how we support pharmacies to increase the uptake in each locality. So the essential service which the P&A refers to are the core service that every pharmacy must provide. So that is one essential service which myself, David, and team looked at very closely. Then we also looked at those advanced services. Advanced services, pharmacists have to sign up to it. Now, it is great because we've got great uptake across the board, which is excellent, but they're not mandated to provide an advanced service. And that's what we're trying, the balance we're trying to strike. We want more people providing those advanced services, but also the core essential service they must provide to be able to be on the pharmaceutical list.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the report and thanks for coming along and explaining some of the difficulties. I'd like to just explore a little bit around how either we can or other organisations can help you with some of the supply chain issues, which, just from anecdotal evidence, is a big thing for pharmacies. Rather than actually dispensing the drugs and the prescriptions, there's a lot of chasing around for the items or for replacement items. So where do you feel that more support could be given to the front end? Because, to be honest with you, we've all witnessed it. Pharmacists are getting abused because they haven't got something and it's not within their gift to get it in the timescales that they would have wanted it. So where do you think the help for that within the supply chain can come or should come? And if there's some blockages, where do you think you could get some help either from us or from people at a higher political level than us? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brownie. I think you're absolutely spot on. In fact, last week I received a complaint from a patient that we can't get the medication. And what happens for us pharmacists, we have to, if there is a prescription, for example, that's got 4 items on it, we have to not dispense one and then get a patient to flourish another prescription to see whether they can find it elsewhere. And also we provide alternative for GPs to try and reduce the burden on a patient having to go around different pharmacies to try and source the item. There is some work we've done with the ICB. We've requested for medication to be prescribed generically, because what tends to happen is that all these drug companies, they promise rebates to the ICB, and then GPs prescribe those branded or generic items, and then it goes out of stock. And then that puts us in a very difficult position. But if it's prescribed as a generic sort of fashion, then we can be able to source and help patients easily. This is the work we've done locally. Unfortunately, a lot of other pieces of work need to happen nationally. We've got drug shortage website where we are notifying all healthcare professionals, items that are in short supply, the government tend to do what you call shortage protocols to give pharmacists opportunity to use alternatives without having to go back to GP to get the prescription changed. So unfortunately, I know Keir Starmer talked about trying to fix the supply chain issue. It is a real issue, and that's something that needs to be done centrally. Us locally, we can just make sure that we are prescribing generically to try and support pharmacies to be able to source those items.
Councillor Perfect, just finally view.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for the report, and thank you, sir, for your introduction and the report. I'm just interested, I mean, for some time, I mean, and we've had the discussion here at this committee about the challenges around particularly the pharmacy provision within Rainham. I'm just interested within this report in a couple of things. I mean, I've noted, obviously, a number of the points made on page 106 or 296 of the main pack in terms of the accessibility of the pharmacies within a regular walk, which I've noted. But my concern actually principally around these pharmacies is actually the accessibility in the opening. I mean, particularly noted here, of the 6 community pharmacies, we've only got 2, 33% that are available after 6 p.m. on weekdays, and 2 pharmacies are open on Sundays. Now, that's a particular concern for people in Rainham. We've got a very elderly population, but we've also got, particularly in the fringe areas, as you look at the map in figure 23, you'll see a number of these pharmacies that are actually open after 6 p.m. or open on the Sundays are actually constrained in the town centre, meaning that actually everybody doesn't, you know, these numbers around 100, you know, 99.98% of people having access within 10 minutes. Actually, that's not true when it comes to these periods, particularly this time outside of usual working hours, which is of concern, obviously, to our population that need to access them at weekends or in evenings. So I'll just be interested in terms of what your thoughts are on that, and then particularly then around the services that are being provided. I mean, I could say this, and I'm a politician. I still don't think that the services these particular phaRmacies are providing is particularly that good, to be honest. I think, you know, the feedback I get from residents, yes, some of it's anecdotal, but some of it is, you know, casework that I receive is that the service is pretty poor, and I think that's noted here. We've got, you know, in terms of contraception, pharmacies signed up 3, 50%. Pharmacies actually providing 1 at 17%. Then when we go down to smoking, and obviously noting that the comments that have been made on page 107 saying that asthma levels are higher than Medway levels and lower than England levels, but the report has got here 3%, 50% of the pharmacies are signed up for smoking cessation, and 0% are actually providing any service. So, I mean, and the same and on, you can particularly see, if you look at some of the figures in that chart compared to some of the other towns, you know, even the next one in Strood, you know, the figures are pretty poor. I appreciate it's a smaller sample size, but the figures are quite poor. So I'm just interested in terms of how we've then come to some of these judgments saying that there are no gaps, you know, it's all good, you know, let's move on. I'm just interested, I feel, I don't necessarily agree that there's no gaps. I'm just interested in terms of sort of noting that there aren't, let's say, significant gaps, what we can do as an authority, perhaps you, David, and also and from your experience, sir, in terms of, you know, your wider experience in terms of pharmacies in other areas where you've got these huge gaps in provision, in terms of what we can do to try and drive some better providers in terms of this moving forward. Appreciate that was quite a long-winded explanation, but thank you, Chair.
Hopefully there'll be a good, robust, short answer as well from David and Mark.
So I'll start answering, and then Mark will come in with more detail, I'm sure. So around access, so we need to think about sort of the core access to the core hours, and in terms of determining whether or not there's a gap, there's this balance. We've got to take into account market stability, and we need to think about the access in terms of. And I'm not getting my words right around here. Let me get my thoughts in order. Mark, you go first.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. There are instances where we need to address poor performance. And the ICB, so the power to remove any pharmacy from the pharmaceutical list sits within the ICB.
Now, there's an ICB commissioning hub, which sits at Frimley, that looks at all the contracts within pharmacy. So in Rainham, I know you're probably referring to a particular contract that is having an issue, so I'm quite vast on that. So they're having weekly meetings with the ICB team, and there's been a number of breaches notices issued. So when it comes to poor performance, that is being dealt with. Now, poor performance doesn't indicate there is a gap. You need to address the poor performance, and then you put out a gap. So, which is a very sensitive topic, and I don't want to go into detail, obviously, because of the setting we are in now. But they are currently working very closely to see how they resolve the issue. And half of the challenges we're facing is the viability of those pharmacies. I know they are not able to pay their staff because there's a funding crisis, and there's a massive issue in terms of how they have set up the organization. But that's a different issue they need to sort out. Now, when it comes to Sunday provision, you will expect people to travel a little bit more when it's out of hours, because in an average pharmacy, the amount of requests to get on a Sunday is very low to keep the pharmacy viable. And if you think about paying staff and being able to operationally run the pharmacy, it becomes financially unviable to keep those pharmacies open. And that's part of what David referenced around the economic review and the need for us to continue to monitor those pharmacies in our locality. And I would totally agree with you that we need to do more to strengthen the current pharmacies we have. And there are several things we can do to have a good and better IT and integrated system where a pharmacist can see or finish the consultation that goes straight to the GP. I think that's something that I've been working with the ICB to see how we have a much more robust integrated system. Around services, I've got to disagree with you because the pharmacists are, I think, absolutely amazing, not because I represent them. They go the extra mile for patients. In practice, I know there was a patient that really struggled to obtain an emergency contraception. Due to contraception service, they're able to obtain it within a few minutes in a pharmacy. This is something they would have waited for a GP appointment and a consultation to get. So I think, and also Pharmacy First, we've saved the ICB over 1.2 million in terms of those appointments that would have gone and wasted GP time to access. So I think, bear in mind we'll launch this in 2024. We've made real good progress in terms of the service delivery for patients, and we continue to do better. And if there are any instances where there are problems, please do flag, and we can obviously try and see how we resolve it. It's always going to be teething problems, but let's not use one or two issues to then mask the whole of this sector, because I feel that these guys are doing an incredible job.
Councillor Perfect, they're going to want a quick response back.
I'm going to be
David,
very quick.
I need to move on.
I might pick this up with David offline. Maybe we can have a bit of a conversation. I just wanted to clarify. There wasn't anything. I was actually saying that I really value pharmacists, and I think they do an incredible job. I think that the challenge we particularly got in Rainham is that we've got one provider not wanting to have this in public session, but which is, as you can see from this map, dominating the picture of the town centre, and I think that is a significant challenge, and I'd welcome a conversation offline about what we might be able to do moving forward, because I think actually for residents that would be good too, because I don't want residents feeling that the picture from this, perhaps by the press, will picture everything's okay when necessarily sometimes on the ground because of one particular provider they're struggling. But I very much appreciate your answers, sir, and thank you, David.
I don't think anyone here feels that you've had a go at pharmacies, don't worry. But we had a members' item on pharmacies not providing or not enough pharmacy. We've just had that, Mark, recently, where we was told everything was wonderful and everything was fine. So we'll touch on that in a moment, but we was told there was no issues with the pharmacies in Rainham. David, did you want to come back to Councillor Perfect, or are you going to go up with that response?
Willing to say, yeah, very happy to meet with you to follow that up, yeah.
Health Watch Medway, would like to come in finally from you, and then we can.
Thank you, Chair. I mentioned this in other meetings, but my biggest bugbear is that actually we do have pharmacies, and yes, they are businesses, but service provision within pharmacies are very inconsistent.
Yeah.
So. It's gone. Oh, it's back. just looking at needle exchange facilities, looking at health checks, a very, very low number of pharmacies that actually are providing across Medway. And when you think about Hoo Peninsula, for example, access to a pharmacy is a real challenge. My question is, do we have a plan, or do we want to sit around the table with pharmacists and look at how can we expand service provision within existing pharmacies if we can't have any more new pharmacies being set up? But equally, I just want to draw attention, the substance-related deaths in Medway are high, and we don't have, for example, Raynham, we don't have a needle exchange pharmacy. We really need to address those kind of inequalities in Medway if we are going to reduce unnecessary deaths.
David, do you want to pick that one up? Because obviously it was no gaps in Hoo Peninsula. You want to pick that one up about the gaps, because there was no gaps in Hoo Peninsula, but obviously there is, the residents over there will tell you something different.
Yes, so again, I mean, it's a similar issue in terms of market stability, and there have been no expressions of interest to set up a pharmacy in those areas. That you need to have a certain population density, to have enough customers to be able to sustain another pharmacy. So we have to work with the existing pharmacies that we have there at the moment. There is a lot of work that our public health teams do with pharmacies in terms of working with them around doing health checks, and we can have some further conversations with the pharmacies over in Hoo Peninsula.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Look, Councillor Crozier, I'll just come over you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You say about the densities of people around Medway. When we look at when you look at the list you've got here, you were showing that Peninsula 25,000 people. It's the same density pretty much as Chatham. So I don't understand why we haven't got more, as the lady says, more pharmacies than we have.
Okay, so there are two things here. So density is the number of people within a certain area. So it's not the absolute number of people, it's how close they are together. And the numbers of pharmacies per 100,000 population, when I looked at those numbers, I was initially a little concerned that there was quite such a large variation. And we were saying that there's no...
Turn your mic off, Councillor Crozier.
So then I started thinking, so how low would the numbers have to go for us to say, right, there is a gap? And that then led me to realise that those numbers on their own aren't actually that useful. So, for example, if you imagine you've got 50,000 people living very, very close together with a big pharmacy in the centre, you could have all 50,000 people that can walk to that pharmacy within 10 minutes, for example. And as long as it's a big pharmacy with lots of staff, even though it's only one pharmacy for 50,000 people, so that would be two per 100,000, everybody can still access that pharmacy easily. If you had the same 50,000 people spread over a large area, you could have 50 pharmacies and still have a very small proportion of people who can actually get to a pharmacy within 10 or 20 minutes. So it's the relationship, it's the density of the population, how close they are together in relationship to the number of to the access to the pharmacies. That's important. So those numbers on their own aren't terribly helpful. You need to take into account other factors.
So with the Peninsula, for example, we've got 25,000 people, got hardly any access to pharmacies at all. And when you look at the graph you have here of what percentage of the population in each of the areas of each of the diseases, the Peninsula rate's pretty much the highest in all of them. And yet, we don't have access to either surgeries or pharmacies. I don't understand with that number of population why we haven't got more pharmacies. We've got the same number of people in the peninsulas we've got in Raynham. Raynham's got several pharmacies. Not now they haven't, but they haven't. We've got even less.
Okay. So.
What I can tackle, I think what David's trying to explain, Kent is very unique in terms of our geography and how the population is spread out. If you look at the peninsula, you've got a huge land mass, but a lot of it is not habitable. So what we've discussed at the PNA as well is to look at how, if we have, let's say, population or the new builds happening in a particular part of a peninsula, we can then look at how we can support those people in terms of getting them access to pharmaceutical care or ensuring their pharmaceutical needs are met. But looking at the spread and the density of the population, the more down the bottom, if you see the way the graph is colored, around the bottom end of the peninsula, and in terms of them being able to access a pharmacy within driving distance, over 99% of them are able to access a pharmacy within 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes drive to a pharmacy. So unfortunately, because of the size of the peninsula, a lot of people will have to drive because you can't have a pharmacy in the middle of... yeah, I think you know what I mean.
Well, we understand that we need to drive on the peninsula. We're all car dependent there. But we still need to get to the... And we're talking about increasing the numbers of people on the peninsula. It just seems ludicrous that we haven't got more pharmacies and more access to it, more access to doctors.
David, are you coming back?
Well,
can I ask Mark to turn his microphone off? Mark, can you turn your microphone off, Mark, please?
Yeah, just to say, as the population increases over there, it will increase to the point where it will make it viable for another pharmacy to open up. But at the moment, it wouldn't be viable.
Thank you, Councillor.
Let's be
Councillor
clear.
Crozier, do you want to come back? Are you coming back for a question or just one more comment?
Just one more comment. Come back. That's viable for the pharmacy, not viable for the people.
Right, not the residents, the pharmacy. Thank you, members. Look, I've said it before, so don't take it personal. Right, I think the report is great. It's full of good detail. And Mark, don't take it personal. I think pharmacists do a great job in considerably tough times. Right, you've got shoplifting. You've got we've got people coming from Essex here to get ADHD drugs in Medway. It's crazy, right, that they can't get. And I'm not going down the Brexit route and all that, but because of all the trouble with it. The problem is, I suppose for me, is when I read the document, and this is for the Health and Wellbeing Board to hopefully really they have the time to go into it in depth. Because for me, if you put a whole, well, when I saw no gaps anywhere, I was totally shocked. Because everything was wonderful. We know it's not. But every single page I turned in every area, okay, I might say Gillingham's lucky got 12 pharmacies, whatever. Every single time I turned to every area, I thought I'm going to see something here which is going to say there's a slight gap, or it's an amber, or it's whatever. Maybe it's the way the P&A is operated, that you don't get an amber, or you don't get a green, you don't get a red, because I was totally surprised that there's no gaps. So my first question is what's the risk management process here? So we know pharmacies are closing, and we're not in necessarily, no offence, Mark, we're not in necessarily to worry about the business going down because of, but they are going down because of them pressures, not just because they don't want to take on. I know pharmacies are not taking on our public health services. I know they're not delivering because actually the incentives are not there. It's not because they don't want to do it. They have trouble trying to get the items and the incentive and the liaison. In the early days when we done the stop smoking, which was brilliant, they were all on it because there was a real push and real, from government as well as elsewhere. What's the risk plan for you going ahead with this, having it approved by the Health and Wellbeing Board, that everything's rosy in the garden, and then all of a sudden 6 pharmacies close? Because we know for a fact there are pharmacies in Medway that are close to closing.
So as part... So as part of the way the P&A process works, every month we get a list of any changes that happen to any of the pharmacies within Medway's Health and Wellbeing Board's patch. We then look at those and then assess the impact that those changes have had or could potentially have. And then if we believe there are changes, then we will write what's called a supplementary statement, and we publish that supplementary statement, which is effectively an update of the P&A. In addition to that, the Public Health Intelligence team is developing an interactive map of the pharmacies, and we'll be updating that so we can keep tracking and keep a visual representation of what the pharmacy provision looks like across Medway.
I get that, David, and I'll bring you in, Mark, as well. You must look at on the council with the ICB. I hope you get better transparency and teamwork with the ICB than what we do. But you get that monthly one, you get that weekly one, a pharmacy close, you get that. It almost goes to say, what's the P&A about then? Because in the P&A is your wider document where you can highlight risks, highlight areas which areas that, I'm not just going to say Rainham, I'm going to say somewhere different, Gillingham North, right, where the pharmacy were closed, but it's a risk area because that business may go down, right? Isn't it your ideal opportunity to put in that P&A a bit of risk element there as well and about how things could change? Because it's a glowing document that we've got no issues. And we speak about the issues at every single meeting we have here. There's issues, not with pharmacists, Mark, not only with pharmacists, but issues with accessibility, issues in the peninsula, issues in other areas as well, where we can't access services. Now, you know, hopefully Chatham's going to be well, you probably know when you've done Chatham, they're going to have that other centre, they're going to be well represented. But the plans for the rest of the area is very dodgy and shaky. But on the P&A, we don't seem to recognise that things are a bit. Maybe they don't do that. Maybe that's the document you've done. I remember, bless him, me and James used to have this row every single time. Because it just seems like we don't take advantage of risk or of highlighting the need of investment and the need of better services in Medway. It just doesn't. And the pharmacists are being asked to do everything. And the plan ahead in the 10-year plan is you're going to be asked to do everything. So we should be supporting that. But actually, you know yourself, if you've got 1 or 2 pharmacy, whatever, and then 3 go down, not everyone's got a car. Not everyone can access. We all tend to think that everyone jumps in a car. I don't believe it because they can't. Or they can't after 5 o'clock and they all head into a certain pharmacist on the top of Canterbury Street or whatever because that's the only one that's open. Or they go into the big superstores which don't have the drug and they're given a bit of paper to come back in 4 days' time. It's not in the plan. It's nothing in there. There's nothing in the P&A that says these are the issues we have. Can I just ask you just quickly though, how many people responded? I can't remember. How many people responded to the P&A, to the consultation that went out?
Chair, do you mean patients or members of the public?
Yeah, our members of the public.
Just over 900, about 950 or so.
Right, okay. I suppose that's not bad considering, I mean, it's poor, but it's not bad considering maybe what is that from what you see elsewhere, is that what a normal standard is, Mark?
That is right, yeah. And I know the council did push this, including Health Watch, with members of the public. And that's why we've got such a good number. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my only last comment would be is that I know many of us love a big report and love a nice, massive report. Members of the public, I've said before, we should have a dashboard or we should have a one-page thing of response for this because no one's going to pick up that massive report and recognise anything from it. But if you see, apart from people that have got real interest, but if a resident out there wants to see, if they pick it up and see a one-page thing saying that you're well served in your area, I bet you get loads of phone calls. Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the report and recommends it to the Health and Wellbeing Board for approval.
Agreed, members? Agreed? Agreed, thank you. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming. Thank you, good to see you. Thank you. We probably might get you back again when we talk about pharmacies. 2 minute. 2 minute comfort break. 2 minute only, please. Thank you. Okay, members, we've got item 12 now, the hospital discharge Medway adult social care item. Jackie, I understand that Sue is not here this evening and you're presenting the item.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor MacDonald. So obviously I'll take the paper as read, but I just want to give a bit of a background. So obviously colleagues from MFT, the ICB, come and talk about some challenges that they have at the Acute Trust. There's always a discussion about hospital discharge, and we do reflect on the fact that Medway Council Adult Social Care are responsible for supporting some of those patients to be discharged. So this paper specifically focuses on those patients that adult social care support from the Acute Trust, so Medway Hospital. It also reflects on out-of-area hospitals because it's Medway residents that may be in London and have resulted up in being in hospital. I've also included in there as well about discharge to assess beds. So they are where somebody is discharged from hospital by our health colleagues into a bed, and then it's deemed they're no longer health funded, so they become adult social care's responsibility, and we're then responsible for moving those people on to another care home or for them to stay there. And obviously if we can't move them out of those D2A beds, that causes a block in the system. Just from today's information, just to give you an update, we've currently got 6 patients in mental health wards, 12 in a discharge to assess beds, and we've got 28 currently at Medway Foundation Trust on pathway 3, which is where somebody is looking for a long-term residential care home, and that's probably the most challenged we've been for over 2 years.
Thank you, Jackie. Members, Councillor Printer.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jackie. I just want to say, look, I've had to use this a few times, and I know your team worked very hard with a very complex issue, which a lot of it is out of your own hands because you're at the behest of the market to a lot of the point, and you got pressure from a hospital. I know we've discussed this quite a few times. You've got pressure from a hospital who want to clear their beds, and there's Medway patients who need to get in that hospital as well. But you get that backlog. Firstly, will the home that Medway Council are building take a lot of that up? Because I understand that's multi-use. Because of looking at your numbers, you've got dementia problems there as well in the community. But it's that standard residential that's quite high as well, which you'd think would be the easy fix. You know, the nursing actually is lower, the source times, than the residential. Can you explain why that, and also the question on the Medway Council built home?
Thank you. So, yeah, the Medway Council built home is anticipated, so the 40 downstairs and 40 upstairs is to support hospital discharge, and that's why we're looking at that from a residential nursing dementia setting. So we'd want people to be able to move there as a step out, so effectively those D2A beds. So that's something, but obviously that's longer term, so we need to be looking, we're looking at what we're doing now. And then, sorry, what's your second question? I've forgotten already. Oh, standard residential, sorry. So historically, standard residential was never an issue, but what we found is that more care homes are dealing with more complex people, and therefore there were fewer standard residential beds available. And that's where the problem arises then, because there were more people with dementia than those standard care. Generally speaking, we will always try for somebody that's standard residential to get them to return back home, but there are some that are just can't be on their own, and that's the option that we have to go for.
Yeah, thank you. That's more of a statement, really. I understand that from my own grandparents. Didn't need to be in hospital, but couldn't be at home. Didn't need nursing care, but just needed somewhere a bit safer. So that's probably a really good hole we could fill, really, to flow that through. And also, I think there's a stat in there for every day you spend in hospital, your recuperation is a week or 2 weeks, I think it is. I can't remember exactly what it is. So we really need to get that moving. But yeah, appreciate the work that you do.
Thanks, Councillor Printer. Councillor Hamadisha.
Thank you for the report, Jackie. Just one question regarding the table regarding for Medway Hospital. For mental health residential stroke nurses, you got redacted number under 5, and it's not applicable. And then also you don't have it, it's not applicable for the shortest source time as well. I don't understand why. I'm trying to get my head around.
It relates to just an individual.
Just that one individual?
Yes.
Okay, I thought, okay, fine. Wow. Okay, thank you. Short one.
Any other members? Okay, I've got to come. So can we just, as you know, can we just say, I mean, obviously it's quite shocking, isn't it? And Jackie, you're saying it's pressured now. We've got significant pressures now, and this is before we go into the winter pressure, right? So you must be really concerned because as Councillor Brent said, the home's not going to be built and done by our winter. We wish it could be. We maybe get one that you can just wheel in. How worried are you with the?
I am worried. I would like to say that we see a drop in pressures across the year. I don't think that winter ever seems to have gone away. I'm looking at Mark because it is constantly pressured all the time. During the winter period, we do get some additional funding that enables us to source some additional beds. And so that is being already looked at by the Partnership Commissioning team. There is the Health and Care Partnership exec look at different options with that short-term funding as well. I talked earlier on when Councillor Perfect talked about the budget, about some of the pressures. So we will always, because we have to consider best value and we have to consider our budget, look for contracted care homes within our band rates. But as Councillor Hamadashi said and Councillor Prentice said, people decline when they are in hospital. So we will often end up paying a higher rate because our council contracted care homes aren't able to support those people, and then that in turn has a problem with the budget. So obviously we're keen to get people out of hospital as quickly as possible for their health reasons, but also because of the balance around the budget implications.
Thanks, Jackie. And Mark, I don't know if have you seen this as one of the worst times where the winter's not gone away, we are just pressured?
I think we've joked a few years back that winter was for the whole of the year, but certainly this year it feels like it is. And I think with the NHS and local authorities being in such difficult financial positions, it hasn't allowed us to maybe put some of the money aside to help and support and buy us short-term placements. So I agree with everything that Jackie said. It feels like it's going to be a really difficult year. I think having said that, there are some things that we can do internally. So I think within the report it describes some of the sort of the challenges within the hospital. I think I've heard Nick Sinclair describe 32 discharge pathways. So I think for anyone that's coming in to support the discharge within the acute hospital, it's a very confusing landscape. We need to do our best to make sure we've got as few as discharge pathways as possible. And then, Jackie and I have been doing some work around bed brokerage, attempting to stimulate the market and encourage care homes. But as you've said, there's only so much we can do. There aren't gaps in the care home beds at the moment. It feels, particularly difficult.
What's the split between the health-funded health service? Because there are people that have ongoing health care needs that should be funded under that. Remind me what it's called, Jackie. That's it. That should be funded under that rather than the council funding. And what's the split?
Do you know, I don't actually know what the data is. I think that's something we'll have to go away and have a look at, because generally speaking, if somebody is discharged from a hospital on a health-funded pathway, we don't become involved until it becomes to a point where actually they're no longer eligible for funding, and then obviously we do at that stage.
I think also we've possibly changed the relationship, so we recognise that the patient's at the centre, so we'll discharge the patient and then have the discussion or argument around who picks up the cost. And I think Jackie and I have done our best to change some of those behaviours and make sure that we're focused on getting the right care for the right patient in a timely way as well.
I need just a couple more. The review of the transfer to Care Hub, when is that starting? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you. So, as I said with the other paper, things change very quickly when you write write a paper. So the transfer of Care Hub work had already taken place. That was being led by the Health and Care Partnership, led by the Health and Care Partnership with partners around the room. Because of the challenges faced at MFT, we are now being supported by the Better Care Fund support programme, which is part of the LGA, and with Newton and another organisation coming in. And what we've discussed and agreed with Leanne, Ed, myself, Sue, Mark and other colleagues, is that focus is going to be on, we're calling it a review of IDT. So it's IDT, the pathways. So we say about the 32, and you'll see at the beginning of this document there should only be three really. Review of the pathways with the outcome being a fully functioning transfer care hub. So that will be done,
I mean, thank you, Jackie, for the transparency as well, because, I'm going to write it down, the 63 to 118 days for respite, the 21 to 84 days for dementia, nursing dementia, between 35 and 143 days. And we know it's not great, but we know you also do your best and you try and get people out as quick as you can as well. So just the last comment before I ask Mark about the neighbourhood health services and how it's all going to transform this and how wonderful in the 10-year plan. You didn't realise you're coming back for that. Discharge to assess, really challenging. Is it going to change?
So from a discharge to assess perspective, because the beds are being used for discharge to assess, the issue then becomes that the beds that we would use are now being used as discharge to assess beds. So it's a sort of continuing circle. I will say, and that our providers are really, really good when somebody is discharged into a D2A bed at working with us as a council then about supporting them to move on or looking at what that cost looks like.
And no challenge, Jackie, just an extra one. Nothing gone wrong with the new management process at MFT. It's not declined in our communication or the way we're working.
No, not from my perspective, Mark. Nothing. No.
No, again, not that I've been aware of.
Leanne, did you want to come in?
Thank you. This is a really interesting piece of work, really. The winter pressures is a misnomer. I don't even recognise it, to be honest, because the pressure is constant throughout all the seasons. And there are so many interfaces in this. There's the local authority, there's the health authority, there's private providers, there's the acute trust, and it is the system that we must get to work better. And, I'm grateful for Mark's work in this area too, because, every single partner realises it's the system that has to work. Because if you look at 5.6, on top of that mix, there is the concern from families. There are expectations from families that their loved ones have the best service possible. And of course, we all want to deliver that. But sometimes we can't give a gold-plated service. So there are so many different components in this. But Medway Council, along with our partners, are really concentrating on getting the system to work. Whether that's winter, summer, autumn, spring, it's just got to work.
Thank you, Leanne. And Mark, just finally, you can come back with a PowerPoint next time if you really want to go on this one. But, everyone's saying that this 10-year plan and the neighbourhood health services is going to transform everything. Are we going to go back to a neighbourhood care approach where people are going to be properly supported in our communities and stuff? Is this going to be the saviour of all of this chaos?
Well, I think I have to say yes, don't I? Because it's a NHS 10-year plan, so I'd be foolish to say, no, it's not going to work. But I think there will be some challenges in implementing that, and obviously it's described as a 10-year plan because it's unlikely to deliver significant changes in the first year or 2 years. It is a long-term plan. But certainly I think that we recognise there's more we could do to keep patients out of hospital and care for them in their communities with their wraparound services and urgent community response, and not to transport them to hospital. So we're on a journey. We recognise we need to do some work around identifying those patients which are greatest risk. Those become our priorities to keep out of hospital and keep safe.
I mean, obviously, I'm hoping that is the case. And going back with the government's 10-year plan, hopefully we do go back into that community-led approach to look after people. And just finally finishing with what Councillor Brent said again, none of us want people staying in hospital as long, over the time they need to be in there, because it just absolutely ruins their progression going forward. Vice Chair.
So am I asking for that data that Jackie said she'll find? Okay. It's been agreed that Jackie will provide data about the split between the hospital and adult social care of who takes up the cost for ongoing health needs of discharged patients. I move that the committee notes the report.
Seconded, members, seconded? Yep, agreed? Agreed, thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. You can stay if you want right to the end, Mark. Take care, thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Moving on to item 13, we've got addressing safeguarding adults waiting list backlogs. And we've got Laura here. Welcome, Laura. You've been here all night, so you must come again. We're back here in October. Obviously taking the report as read, Laura. Is there anything you wanted to add just at the beginning of that, or just very briefly?
Yeah, sure. Probably just to add that you'll see from the report that the demand is the real pressure at the moment, and I hope that the report provides some assurances that we're taking a really proactive stance. We don't want a safeguarding service where we're operating waiting lists. That's not good for our residents. We want people to be safe and we want to be working in real time. So we're tackling this in two ways. One, we're looking at our efficiencies and what we can do to streamline processes and work smarter, looking at our resource, and you'll see we've had an increase. That's to better manage our demand, but also we're not just accepting of that demand, we're being really proactive in trying to understand what the drivers are. So we've been working really closely with performance and intelligence and at really early stages of trying to unpick that and understand who our repeat referrals are coming in, are we dealing with them appropriately? And we've got really high numbers of inappropriate referrals, which are a real drain on our resource. So we're working really closely with partners and performance to see what we can do to kind of slow that down and actually use our resource to do the work we want to do, which is to work with residents to provide a safeguarding service. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Laura. We've got any, Leanne, did you want to add before anyone asks any questions? Because obviously safeguarding's been, I know you and Jackie, but safeguarding's something that you've been trying to reduce the numbers for a long time.
Yeah, safeguarding is adult safeguarding is probably one of the issues that keeps me awake at night. Yeah. To be honest, the demand is absolutely growing, and Jackie's given you some figures in here. But what I do want to say is that Adult Services has grasped this issue, but it is going to take a while to work through, and particularly around Section 44, the Safeguarding Adult Reviews. Sometimes when I read those, they're very tragic, and, you know, that person belonged to other people. It's very tragic when you read something like this, and I'm sitting there thinking, if only someone had used their common sense. And that was what basically I found when I came into Medway around this. We are not there now. Okay, you'll see the CQC grade we got. We're striving to improve, but we have made big strides under Jackie and Laura's leadership. However, we've still got a fair distance to travel, and its capacity and its demand. Now, one thing that I haven't sorted in my own mind is, I don't mind demand if that means community is taking responsibility. But at the moment, we're in the situation that once we have those referrals, it's pretty much over to you, Medway Council. And for those of you who are around, that's what it used to be like in children's. So I'm not happy with this. Of course I'm not happy. We can do better, and we will do better.
Any questions? Councillor Amadishe.
Thank you. Mine is more a observation and to underscore everything that's just been said. I too, I stay up all night thinking about safeguarding concerns. One issue regarding inappropriate referrals that needs to be addressed is, how do you support organisations to learn from using inappropriate referrals as respite, just so that it stems the flow? I've referred this individual to this service, now can breathe. Because responsibility is a massive issue when the care should be provided by another organisation that A, doesn't have capacity to go out and see. You might have been the last person that saw that individual. So if anything was to happen, you might still hold the accountability, although you don't have the responsibility. So a lot of staff across the whole care panacea are really stuck and grappling with this whole referral process. And also, how do we educate the community around keeping individuals safe? Some cultural norms, you know, the threshold of what we have to deal with. You know, an inappropriate referral from somebody who comes from maybe a culture where that is deemed acceptable. You know, how do we go about addressing that? So it's a plea, and it's more a observation that a lot of work, a lot of resources need to go into this, because education needs to play a big role in terms of referring. I do a lot of work with teachers, and they see the individuals that they were referred to social services, and they turn up to school the next day, and adults as well in terms of higher education as well. So yeah, I support everything that needs to be done. A lot of work needs to be done, and we need to keep it front and centre in our priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Discharge. Any comments? I think that's right. Laura, do you want to come back?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to say that, yes, I completely agree. We're doing lots of work already in the background. We're probably not doing as much as we want to be doing. But just to share some examples, so we're having joint SLTs with our housing colleagues, and at those meetings, this is where we pick up where we're receiving, for example, lots of concerns around people who don't meet the criteria for housing, and then they come into safeguarding to get support. So we're picking up those conversations so that actually we don't carry that work, because we wouldn't just close that case, even though that, as you said, that risk would still sit with us because we know about it. What we need to develop is those quick handover pathways so that residents aren't being batted back and forth, but they're actually getting the service from the service that can deliver it. And we're doing lots of work with providers. So I meet regularly with all the safeguarding leads from different partner agencies, particularly our providers, who send in a big majority of our concerns to do education and share with them concerns that have come in that aren't appropriate and so forth. So we are doing some of that work already.
Thank you, Laura. Councillor Jackson, final comment from you. Question.
Yeah, it was just a quickie. I had a meeting today with the Care Experience National Lead in prisons, and they were saying that people leaving prison that had neurodivergent were really they were already hooked in with the gangs, and they were just waiting for them to come out of prison to start cuckooing them all over again. Are we starting to see that in Medway? Is it? And she said that's like the big issue that they have at the moment.
Thank you. From my perspective, we haven't seen referrals coming in specifically around that. Some of the referrals we see coming in are around us undertaking a care needs assessment. We do have good links with the prisons. So my colleague Sharon Greasley, she links in with the prisons regularly. So I'll pick that up with her to find out if there's a conversation for us as safeguarding to be having with prison services around that point.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just from your perspective, in terms of the voluntary sector, how do you feel they can support you better? What kind of gaps have you seen, and what challenges do you think they face that they could probably overcome to help you with your capacity issues?
I think at the moment that's probably difficult to answer until we understand the concerns that are coming in that aren't meeting our thresholds. Then I think there's conversations for us to be having with our VCS. So I think, for example, if we pick up, we're getting concerns coming in around self-neglect or neglect, and that's because of hardship and people not having income or having perhaps just not having that income, losing their work, then perhaps what we'd need to do is work with like our Imago disability assistant, maybe get them sitting at our front door, being more visible, so actually they're doing preventative and proactive work. So rather than somebody getting into that space, or when they're into that space, we've got a really quick kind of resolution and handover, but difficult to say at the moment.
Jackie, do you want to come back?
Thank you. Yeah, just to add to that, one of the things that Laura spoke about earlier on is around getting the data and understanding. What we're also doing is our principal social work team will then be going out to providers, to the VCS and so on and so forth to talk about actually what is and what constitutes safeguarding concern and what isn't. Actually, is it a care needs assessment or actually is it not social care at all? So we'll be reaching out further to do that piece of work as we move forward.
Thank you so much. Okay, so and thank you, Laura. It's good that we've. I think obviously the numbers are scary when we see the backlog, but it's good to have a head of safeguarding in place and helping Jackie and the team and moving forward. So we'll probably have you back, hopefully, with the numbers dropped significantly next time. No pressure, but hopefully.
Can I just add to that just to say we have had a particularly challenging month in terms of referrals, but actually we've taken some really positive management action and changed some ways of working. And just to say that you've got table 2 there that shows quite high numbers of concerns. Actually, as of today, we've got 33 concerns, and actually they were all, as in not allocated, but they've all been received in the last 48 hours. So that's all live work. Yes, that's had a slight knock-on effect on inquiries, but we're working really hard to work in real time. And if I may, I know we're over time, but it's just to say we're really open to kind of scrutiny as a safeguarding team. And we've engaged with the LGA and ADAS, and we're going to be receiving them coming in to look at the plans we're putting in place and give us some oversight and feedback as to are we doing actually everything we can.
You're going to regret saying that now, Laura. Jackie will have you in now. You're going to regret saying that. Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the report.
That's agreed, members? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Laura. Final item, work programme, please. Terry, you've got 1 minute. Counting.
That's all I need. Thank you. So I've got nothing really to add to the report. I just wanted to flag some members will have received an invite to an informal meeting with the ICB that they've requested us to set up around updating you on the community services contract ahead of when they come in October. We've scheduled that for the 3rd of September on Teams, so hopefully most of you can attend.
Thank you, Terry. Obviously, considering our conversation earlier, we'll see what communication goes on before that with our colleagues over in the ICB to see where that goes. But you know, I'm sure Leanne will back me up. I think we still have to carry on working with the teams to make sure that our residents get the best service possible, even if some of the executive and the leaders have a different opinion to us. But okay, thank you, Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the report and agrees the work programme as set out at Appendix 1 to the report, subject to accepting the proposed changes outlined in italic text on Appendix 1.
Is that agreed, members? Agreed? Thank you all so much for your time and your robust scrutiny tonight. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.